trip. Now, the Predators have been playing their best hockey at Bridgestone Arena, and I've been afraid of the Zag D-Mase. And tonight, the Predators take on a not very good team in the Ottawa Senators. So it should be a good game tonight, and it is fun to have hockey and a playoff race here at Bridgestone Arena. Willie Donick will join us shortly. D-Mase is here. How we doing?
Hey, I'm doing well this time. I'm excited to have the head coach on, Brian Callahan, to discuss the Titans and the state of the offense, and that's something that I'm sure everybody wants to hear. We had ran on with Chase and Big Joe last hour. We got a chance to hear Rand at the combine as well, so it's going to be nice to hear Coach.
And joining us now is Titans head coach Brian Callahan. Brian, appreciate you for joining us. I know that this week is a busy one, so we appreciate you taking the time to chat with us today. First and foremost, I wanted to start off with a topic that we have been talking about ad nauseum. I know a lot of Titans fans have been talking about as well, and that's receiver or offensive line in the first round. Before we get into specifics, kind of wanted to talk about more philosophically. When you look at, receiver versus offensive line, setting your young quarterback up for success, what do you think is more important? Is that being great, having elite protection up front for the quarterback, or can you afford to be good and get the job done up front on the offensive line if you have elite and great pass catchers?
Yeah, it's a great question. Obviously, I've been a part of this debate before, and we ended up selecting Jamar Chase. I do think that there's a value in surrounding the quarterback with capable weapons, and they come in a lot of different forms: receivers, backs, tight ends. The more of those guys you have, the better it's going to be. The more chances the quarterback has for success. The flip side of that argument is that it's hard for a quarterback to complete balls if he can't get the ball off, and he's got to evade pressure at a high rate. And so I think there's arguments for both. I've always generally fallen on the side of having players that can score touchdowns is what matters in today's NFL. But that also shouldn't be assumed that I dismiss the importance of having a good offensive line, because I certainly do not dismiss that. But if you're looking philosophically, that's generally where I've leaned in my career. But I think every year and every situation is different.
Absolutely. Titans head coach Brian Callahan is with us. You bring it up. You were in this situation in 2021 with the Cincinnati Bengals. It's like deja vu all over again. You had the opportunity to either take the offensive lineman, give Joe Burrow some protection, ultimately went with Jamar Chase. You say that traditionally, philosophically, you've taken the touchdown score. I know you were on with our colleague Jared Stillman a few weeks ago, and you said, look, it came down to, do we take the elite touchdown scorer, or do we take the elite player that can't score touchdowns? Obviously, you went with the elite touchdown scorer. I know that no player is Jamar Chase, and it's not fair to compare other players to Jamar Chase. But also, Jamar Chase isn't the only elite touchdown scorer in the National Football League. Do you view Rome Odunze or Malik Neighbors or both as elite touchdown scorers in the National Football League?
Yeah, those guys are really impressive, a little bit that I've seen. Obviously, I'm kind of just starting the college scouting process. But, man, those guys are pretty dynamic, both very different skill sets and styles. But they can both play football. And, I think one of the things that's, unique and probably different than it was in this current situation is in Cincinnati we were picking at 5, and we were picking against 2 players that were both pretty well consensus that they were going to be all-pro caliber players. And so the talent level was equal. And all things being equal, we chose to go with the guy that could score points. I don't know that that's necessarily going to be the case every year in the draft. And so picking at 7, there might be a tackle that is a better player ultimately than the receiver, or a receiver that is better than whatever tackle is available. And in that case, you have to make that decision. I don't think that you can take that situation in Cincinnati and necessarily totally parallel it to where we are now. It makes for good conversation, but I do think the situations are dramatically different, and the types of players are going to be very different. But the good thing is there's a lot of really good ones to pick from when you're picking at 7.
We'll talk with Brian Callahan, the Tennessee Titans' new head coach. Now, Coach, I'm going to stay on the theme of the wide receivers, obviously, because I was a former wide receiver myself.
Absolutely.
How do you approach, because like you said, you got to have touchdown scorers, but how do you approach a situation like Traylon Burks, where he's been here 2 years going on 3? He's shown flashes, and I'm sure you scouted him coming out of college. He's shown flashes, but he's had some really odd injuries. No hamstring pulls, anything like that, but just odd sort of injuries during the year or before the camp start. How do you approach that situation?
I think there's an element for him of personal accountability and getting himself ready to play. I know that's been a up and down issue for him as far as being physically in the right place, in the right space to go perform at a high level. And hopefully he's learned those lessons. I think you're exactly right, though. He does flash. He has talent. He has ability. And part of my job and our job as an offensive coaching staff is to put him in position to do things that he does well. And hopefully we can, with the strength training regimen and with the practice regimen, hopefully we can help him stay healthy. That's also part of our job, too. And I think that he's got the ability and talent to help us. And our job is to try to find out the best way to get it from him. And I think that when you have good players, you got to do your best to get something out of them. And even though he's been inconsistent in his previous 2 seasons, he's got a fresh start with us. And hopefully he takes advantage of that and comes ready to roll in April when we start up.
And I guess that's all a player wants, especially when a new head coach comes in and they've had difficulty staying in a lineup or even, getting playing time. They just want a clean slate, and it seems like you guys are going to give Traylon that. Now, in regards to the offensive line, I don't want to say your dad because I want to keep this more coach to coach, but Bill,
sure.
What he's able to do and what he's been able to do with offensive linemen. Does that give you a little leeway to not necessarily, because, everybody, the question is, will the Titans take a offensive lineman in the first round or will they take a receiver? Having someone like Bill on the staff, does that give you the leeway to potentially, if you don't see that guy you want in the first round, you can push it off to the second round because Bill has done an exceptional job at developing offensive linemen?
Yeah, I think that does work into our advantage for sure. I think he's as good a developer of offensive line talent as anybody in football. So that's the unique advantage that we have. I will say he'll be the first to tell you, and I'll be the second, that it's hard to replace. It's hard to replace great players. So if you have a chance to get an impact player up front, it is hard to falter there. And if you got a great talent and great coaching, now you have yourself a chance to have a dynamic player for your offensive line. But it does give us an advantage in the sense that he's as good at developing linemen as anybody in football. And we all know over the course of a season, you're going to have to play with a bunch of them. And you got to have depth and you got to have good coaching in order to make those guys have an impact when you need them, when you call on them to come play for you. And inevitably, you're going to play with probably 8 or 9 different linemen over the course of the season, and they all have to be up to the task. And thankfully, we have my dad here to do that. And I think there's some interesting talent on our roster, too, that I'll be interested to see how they develop with my dad there as well. So, obviously, a huge advantage for us.
Well, I'm going to start referring to him as your dad because you refer to him as that as well.
Do.
Obviously.
Yeah, I say I've thought about how do I refer to him, and it's like, you know what? He is my dad. He's a great coach, but I'll still refer to him as my dad, and it doesn't bother me. So if you guys want to refer to him as my dad, I'm good with that too.
Absolutely. Brian Callahan, Tennessee Titans head football coach. Now, Coach, you take this job with an offense that has struggled over the last couple of years, whether it be due injury, guys not being available, or the offensive line. Now you have this young quarterback in place who you feel, and I'm sure everyone on that coaching staff feel has talent. But Titans fans, they want to see like this microwave offense. They want to see instant scoring, instant, showtime and everything else. How long does it take for an offense to get going? Because it took you guys some time with Zach Taylor in Cincinnati to get that offense to going. But once they started going, boy, oh boy, were they scoring points. But how long does it take for an offense to really get going the way you envision it?
It does. There's a process to it. You have to build reps over time. As you know, you have to have things that you're good at, things that you can lean on. And then you got to find out what your team is. And I always feel like at the beginning of every season, even in Cincinnati, we were always still trying to find out what were we going to be this particular season. What is our identity as a football team? Because it does change from year to year. Players are different. Scheme evolves. Defensive schemes evolve. And so there's an element of growth that's required. To sit there and say we're just going to roll the ball out in the field in September and score 30 points every game we go out, I think is wishful thinking. It's going to be a process, and we got a lot of things to work through and a lot of players we have to add. But I'm confident that we can get there. I know the system works. I've seen it work a lot of places. And I know that we're going to put guys in great positions. So we'll lean on whatever our strengths end up being this year. And as we keep adding talent, we'll keep putting those guys in great spots to perform. And if we're not great on offense and we're really good on defense, then you know what? We'll lean on our defense. We'll run the ball. We'll do all those things to play with the strength of the team. And so whatever it looks like early on, just know that there's a vision long-term on what we expect it to get to. And that is ultimately being able to be one of the better teams in the NFL in passing and one of the better teams in scoring, because that's ultimately, when you look up at the end of the year, those are the teams that are winning games and getting into the playoffs and having chances to win championships. And so that's the league. It's a passing league, but there's a process to get there.
Talking with Titans head coach Brian Callahan, who's in Indianapolis for the NFL Scouting Combine. Brian, the wide receiver offensive line conversation is not going anywhere. I'm sure at this point you are well versed in this conversation. But as far as the offensive line is concerned, the Titans did take an offensive lineman in the first round last year. Have you decided where Peter Skoronski will play?
Yeah, his best position is going to be guard. There's always a place to cross train, and he'll get some reps there at tackle. But his NFL position, I think he's going to be a dynamic guard. And I do think that he's got the flex to play some tackle if you need it, but I think his best spot is going to be inside. And he went through some growing pains. That's a transition going from a tackle spot to the guard. Things happen faster inside. Bodies are on you a lot quicker. There's an adjustment period that goes with that, and I thought he settled in as the year went along. And I think again with my dad and his technique and how he teaches it, I think is only going to make him better at that spot. And so I'm excited for what he is. He's everything you want in the position, and so. We'll start with him playing guard and probably cross-training some at tackle. Like all these guys will have to play multiple positions, but I think he's going to be a really good offensive guard.
Okay, so Skoronski at guard. That leaves an opening at left tackle, a potential opening at right tackle. What's your philosophy of filling those holes on the outside? Is it putting a veteran next to Peter Skoronski, or is it attacking that in the draft?
It's really hard to get premier tackles in general, left ones in particular. You either got to draft them high or you got to pay them a ton of money in free agency. And generally speaking, those tackles don't ever make it to free agency. It's rare that a high-level offensive tackle makes it into free agency. Just doesn't happen very often. So if you want those style of players, you generally have to draft them high. There is obviously cases where guys have gotten drafted later and played really well, but for the most part, you look at tackles, they're all usually top 15 style picks. And end up playing really well for a long time, and that's where you find them. But I will say that there is some young talent on our line that I do like. I think Jalen Duncan did some good things. I think Petit Frere has talent. I mean, I think we got some guys that have traits that just need to be refined and coached, and hopefully we got more in those spots as well. So.
I was at a university, and I had to pick professors. I think your dad would be that professor. Like, I want that class because I know that I'm going to learn the most that I could possibly learn. We're talking with Tennessee Titans head coach Brian Callahan. Now, the Cincinnati Bengals struggled that first year, and you were there. And then finally got that thing going. What were some things that you saw with that whole process that you will now take with you here, bring with you here, and sort of do some of those same things?
Yeah, there's a lot to learn. Obviously, we got there in 2019, and they had a couple of issues. They had missed on some early draft picks, I think was what hurt the team. We had some aging players that weren't probably what they were in their prime. But again, that was a prideful organization. I mean, they went to 5 straight playoffs. I think Marvin Lewis is a hell of a coach. Did a great job there. I just think that there was a fall off somewhere in a couple of years, and it really set the roster back. And we got there, and there wasn't a lot there that was worth building around at the point. We had, again, aging stars and not a lot of young talent. And so we had to do a great job identifying that talent in the draft. And one of the things I took with me from that particular experience, particularly that first and second year, is we were very intentional about the type of player in terms of the makeup that we brought in. Team captains, guys that played in winning programs was really important to us, and it helped change the culture of the locker room. And then when we supplemented in free agency, we tried to bring in, obviously, the talent that's a requirement. But the second part of it was we tried to bring guys that had been on playoff teams, that have been on winning organizations, and that were the right makeup to help supplement those young players with the same traits. And so we're trying to build a locker room of guys with the ones that are already here, which there's quite a few of them, and then keep bringing in that type of makeup and mentality, because I do believe at the end of the day, everyone in the NFL is going to be good. You're going to have good enough players to win games. What the culture is like in the building and in the locker room is ultimately what's going to separate the great teams from the ones that are just competitive. And we're trying to be a great team, and I think that you have to have a great culture involved. That's largely about what type of player you bring in. And I think if you look at our Cincinnati teams, there's not going to be many people that would argue that the culture in our locker room was probably as good as anybody's, I would argue. And it was very intentional. It was part of the process. And I think I learned a lot from that, and I'll do a lot of those things in a very similar manner.
Now, I know that, the NFL has a lot of rules pertaining to their off season. They want the players to have their time away from the coaches and away from the building, and allow the coaches to do the things that they need to do as far as evaluating and scouting. But as a new coach, does some of those rules change in regards to you being able to talk to a player currently on your team? Because when you get the job, you want to talk to as many guys in that locker room as possible to get them to, so you can fill them out, they can fill you out. But I understand how the rules can be and are typically in the NFL when it comes to the off season.
Yeah, you have to reach out to guys, you have to talk to them. There's a lot of guys. The benefit of being in Nashville is a lot of guys living in town, and so I've seen quite a few guys in the building over the couple of weeks. We are allowed to have conversations. They obviously can't be of schematic and football nature. It's more of a get to know you conversation. But it's been great. I've reached out. I haven't hit everybody yet. It's hard to get everyone all the time. I've missed a bunch of guys back and forth. But the guys that I have talked to hopefully are spreading the same message of, I want guys to come in and talk to me. And my room, you always hear coaches say, hey, my door's always open. I've been places where that's been said. It's not necessarily always true. But I live that. My door is open. I want guys to come talk to me. I want to get to know them. I'm trying to build relationships because those are the most important part of this whole process. Is all guys want to know that you got their back and you care about them and you have their best interest at heart. And I think most guys respond well to that. I know I do. That's the kind of people I want to be around. And so my job is to try to make that environment for the players as well. And, we'll get plenty of time to get to the football stuff. The scheme is there. It'll always be there. We'll get there. But the most important thing for me is building the team and building the culture of the team with the guys that we have in our locker room and then the guys that we're going to bring in.
Brian Callahan is with us. You mentioned just a few moments ago how with a left tackle or any of those premier positions, you either have to draft him high or you have to spend a lot of money on him. And that's unfortunately the reality with free agency. Usually you have to overpay for those players. That's just the nature of the league. What would be, and I know it's ultimately Rand Carthon's decision, but what is your approach in free agency? How aggressive do you plan to be?
Yeah, I think because you have money doesn't mean you have to spend all of it in the first 2 days. I think there's a methodology to that approach. I think there's a couple of impact positions that are going to require a lot of money and some right out the gate. Corners, tackles, those kind of things. Those things show up pretty quickly. Defensive linemen. That you got to be prepared to pay the market value for those positions, and sometimes it's more than you want to pay. But with the way the cap has gone, and it's gone up every year, I think the number is a little bit less of the numbers are going to get blown out, and everyone's going to be, oh my God, I can't believe they paid that much. Well, ultimately, I think you look at it as a percentage of the cap, and if you're paying X amount of dollars and it's 20% of the cap, that's what it's always been. Just the numbers gotten bigger. I think it puts it in better perspective for what you're paying for the market. And yeah, when you go buy players in free agency, you are at the market value and you're at the mercy of the market. And if you want them, you got to pay for them. And sometimes you have to pay more. But there is positions that are that's okay to do. You're going to go pay a corner. You're going to go pay a high end receiver. You're going to go pay a pass rusher. That's what you have to do. But there's a second part of free agency I think that we have to have a really good plan for, and I think we do, is where do you find the value players? Where do you find the guys that you pay $5 to $8 million to that are going to be impact players and impact people on your roster? And so sometimes you can get a little more bang for your buck in that second wave of free agency, and you can add more players. And so when you have holes, you may need to add more necessarily than just having one big marquee splash. Not that you're not trying to get those guys too, but there is a middle class in free agency that I think you can really make an impact on your team. For example, we signed Von Bell in Cincinnati, and he was an impact player both culturally and on the field for a deal that was relatively fair. And he made a bigger impact than his contract, I would say, when you look back on the totality of his time. So it's a fun process, but you can build a lot of different ways. And I think you got to be smart about when you go aggressive and spend really big at the top of the market, and then when you try to find those guys that fit in that middle range of free agency that can still be really impactful players.
How do you approach the tight end position? Because we've talked so much about the wide receiver position, and we've talked about the tackle. Obviously, those are two places of need, but also the tight end position. How do you approach and have you evaluated, and what do you think of Chicago and Wiley? That you got two young tight ends, one that has shown a lot of flash in Chig, and then another that is still learning the game. How do you approach and evaluate that position?
Yeah, I'm actually really excited about that position. I mean, those are two young players. I've always felt like it takes tight ends usually between 3 and 4 years to really come into their own. It's a hard position to play. Because they got to do all the stuff in the run game. They have to be in the pass game. They got to know protections. That position probably has to know more of the offensive scheme than any position on the roster because of just the versatility that they have. And so to see what Chig's done in his career, to see the flashes and potential of an athlete like Josh, those are two young, talented players that we have to get the most out of. And I think we can find great ways to use them because just like any talented player, you find a way to put them in great position to go win matchups. And that's our job as coaches. But I think those guys are both capable of doing that at the tight end spot and can do some of the other things required of the position in the blocking and protection game. When you have a dynamic pass catcher at tight end, you find every which way you can to use them. There's not a lot of them out there, but there is some, the Travis Kelce's of the world. But those guys are so dynamic that they force you to find ways to be creative and get them in spots that they can make an impact. And but I'm of all the positions with young players on our team, the tight end group with those two guys in particular is really exciting. And I think having J.O. there, Justin Outen, coach that group kind of back to what he's been used to doing over his career, I think will really help those guys grow.
We're talking with Titans head coach Brian Callahan. I know the goal is to win games. I know the ultimate goal is to get to the Super Bowl, to win championships, of course. But is another goal of this season to figure out what you have in your young quarterback in Will Levis?
Yeah, I mean, we have to do that as we go. There's I got a lot of confidence and belief in what Will's potential is, and then my job and his job too is to reach it. And I saw a lot of great flashes that when he played this second half of the year. Some really impressive stuff. There's a lot of things that he can get better at too, and I think I'm excited about that process for him. He gets a whole slate of OTAs. He gets a whole training camp as the guy, and I think you're going to see a big jump in his ability to play the position. And I'm super excited about that because he's got all the other things that you want in your quarterback. And again, my job and his to reach his potential. But there's going to be some things that probably both for me as a first-time head coach and for him as a first-time full-time starter that we're going to grow. And there's going to be some bumps that we're going to have to fight through and some adversity that we're going to have to face. And I think we're all aware of that. And it's just a matter of how you respond to that is what's going to determine how good ultimately we can be. So there's some elements of the season that are going to be seeing what we have. But that's without question. We're going to try to go win as many games as possible, put ourselves in good position. So I think we're going to be able to do that. But there's definitely going to be some evaluation as we go, too, on what we have.
Titans head coach Brian Callahan. Brian, really appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us, and safe travels back from Indianapolis over the weekend.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Nice to talk to you guys.
All right, appreciate it. Titans head coach Brian Callahan. We got a lot to unpack there. Got a lot to unpack there, and we will do that coming up next. Full reaction to what we just heard from Titans head coach Brian Callahan, and of course, we are into your reaction as well. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. Caroline, Willy, D-Mase, 1025-1063 The Game. As far as the offensive line is concerned, the Titans did take an offensive lineman in the first round last year. Have you decided where Peter Skoronski will play?
Yeah, his best position is going to be guard. There's always a place to cross train, and he'll get some reps there at tackle. But his NFL position, I think he's going to be a dynamic guard, and I do think that he's got the flex to play some tackle if you need it. But I think his best spot is going to be inside, and he went through some growing pains. That's a transition going from a tackle spot to the guard. Things happen faster inside. Bodies are on you a lot quicker. There's an adjustment period that goes with that, and I thought he settled in as the year went along. And I think again with my dad and his technique and how he teaches it, I think is only going to make him better at that spot. And so I'm excited for what he is. He's everything you want in the position, and so we'll start with him playing guard and probably cross training some at tackle. Like all these guys will have to play multiple positions, but I think he's going to be a really good offensive guard.
That was Titans head coach Brian Callahan, who joined us in the last segment. Caroline, Willy, D-Mase were brought to you by Zen Sports. Start earning cash rewards on your bets today. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-889-9789. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 or older and in Tennessee to bet. We're live out here at Barrel House at Bridgestone Arena. Predators in action tonight, taking on the Ottawa Senators. All right, there you have it. You heard it from the horse's mouth. Peter Skoronski will play guard. Frankly, D-Mase, I was kind of surprised that he just flat out said it. I was expecting a little bit of a tussle.
I wasn't surprised at all. I mean, I think they drafted him initially as a guard, and they see him playing his best football at the guard position. I think what people got to understand is this. Just because you tested well or played well at one position in college doesn't mean that as you start to go through the process of evaluation, coaches or GMs don't see you at another position. They don't see you better fitting at another position. And most of the times it does happen. It happens at the offensive line position, whereas you might have played well at center or guard, but they think, okay, you may be better suited for us at center. Not that you can't, if something goes wrong, you can't be shifted back over to guard. But for us and our team, the way we graded you out, you grade out, and we feel you have a higher ceiling at center than you do at guard, or vice versa. And I think that's what the situation was with Peter Skoronski, where I think a lot of teams, frankly, I believe the Titans are not the only team that probably more than likely would have put him at guard. I think in this league, those measurables do mean a lot. Arm length, stuff like that. It does mean a lot, because I think when we've heard, whether it was Brian Callahan or Rand Carthon talk, they talked about the length and having to go up against these long, physical, quick defensive ends. You have to have some length to you in regards to your arm span. And if you don't have it, not to say you can't play that position, but it makes it harder. To me, it's no surprise. I think he will excel at guard once they get him a legitimate left tackle next to him and a legitimate center. Once you get you more importantly, a center. Once you get you a center next to you, a Ben Jones type of center, or even better, that's going to elevate Peter Skoronski's play, as well as having Bill Callahan as his coach.
I don't have any problem with it, because complaining about where he was drafted at this point, it's built mill.
Yeah,
we've been there.
Yeah.
We've been there, done that. Just blame it on Vrabel because he's gone, so just blame it on him and then move forward. Like I don't have any problem with it. And the reason why I don't have a problem with it is if Bill Callahan comes in and evaluates him and watches the tape and says that Peter Skoronski is a guard, then he's a guard. Like you're to bring in a coach with the caliber of Bill Callahan, and that's what he says, then fine. I have no problem with it. But it does, of course. I thought, before, of course, we heard from Brian Callahan that Peter Skoronski was playing guard. I thought, is there maybe a possibility that Bill Callahan could evaluate Peter Skoronski and say, well, we can put it over at left tackle? And if that was the case, that would solve so many problems, right? And you could address the left guard position, maybe in free agency. It's not as premier of a position. It's not as hard to find a starter at that position. And then you can focus in the first round on finding good pass catchers and finding offensive weapons to put around Will Levis. Obviously, that's not the case. So that leaves open, that poo-poos my fantasy, that leaves open left tackle.
Yeah.
And where you find that left tackle. Any vibe that you got from Brian Callahan of
man,
what they're going to do? Because he did say my philosophy historically in my career has been elite touchdown scorers rather than elite non-touchdown scorers.
Yeah, but I think, if he's openly, saying this, then we gotta remember this is sort of that cloak and dagger time where I say one thing but mean another. I do this but mean that. I zig when I zag. You gotta keep people sort of off kilter other teams, because other teams are looking for, even though they know what your strength and your weaknesses are, they would like a sort of a tip where you think about going as far as the draft. So, I would tend to believe the way he did address it, and more importantly, not necessarily the way he addressed the position. It was how he talked about his dad and how his dad and the question I asked, having your dad as a offensive line coach, him being one of the best, if not the best offensive line coach in the National Football League, does that give you the ability to sort of, okay, we don't have to draft a guy in the first round, as long as our guy or those 2 or 3 guys that we have earmarked, as long as they're there in the second round, I trust that my dad will develop them into great talent. When he sort of said that, in a sense, it made me sort of think, well, are they really sort of glued on taking a tackle at the 7th pick? Or are they like, we're just going to take the best player available, and more than likely the best player available will be a wide receiver if the draft falls the way we believe it will, meaning the quarterbacks will get taken, it will push guys down, and then ultimately, whether it's Neighbors or Dunze, or they move back and they get one of these other wide receivers, there will be a guy that you perceive can be a game changer at that 7th spot at the wide receiver position. So, to me, I don't know which way they're going, honestly. And I think that's the way Brian Callahan and Rand Carthon, they want it. They want that sort of perception to be out there that we can move down in the draft, because Rand said that. I'm open to listening to calls. He said that on the Chase and Big Show. I'm open to listening to calls for that 7th pick. I'm not married to that 7th pick. So that leads me to believe that, hey, listen, they can take a offensive lineman, they could take a wide receiver, or they can move out of the 7th pick and get both of those guys that they want.
And I asked Brian Callahan, look, okay, so you're putting Peter Skoronski at guard. So where do you go at left tackle? What's the best way to solidify that left side? Is it bringing in a rookie, which, of course, we know a starting left tackle, you're usually going to have to take that pretty high? Or do you bring in a veteran to kind of, you know that you have a solution at left tackle with a proven veteran. You have Peter Skoronski at guard, and as we heard Brian Callahan, he and Bill Callahan, his dad, are really encouraged about what he can do at guard. I think that's his best position. But how do you find that left tackle? How do you solidify that left side? This was Peter Skoronski, my goodness. This was Brian Callahan. Brian Callahan.
It's really hard to get premier tackles in general, left ones in particular. You either got to draft them high or you got to pay them a ton of money in free agency. And generally speaking, those tackles don't ever make it to free agency. It's rare that a high-level offensive tackle makes it into free agency. It just doesn't happen very often. So if you want those style of players, you generally have to draft them high. There is obviously cases where guys have gotten drafted later and played really well. But for the most part, you look at tackles, they're all usually top 15 style picks and end up playing really well for a long time. And that's where you find them. But I will say that there is some young talent on our line that I do like. I think Jalen Duncan did some good things. I think Petit Frere has talent. I mean, I think we got some guys that have traits that just need to be refined and coached, and hopefully we got more in those spots as well. So not saying that that's where we're going to stop, but we're going to keep trying to add good players. But I think there's some things to work with on the roster as well.
That vibe that I got from Brian Callahan is, look, we have a couple of pieces that we think can be good depth pieces, that we think can be good swing tackles. We've seen some things that we've liked, Nicholas Petitfrere has been pretty good. Nothing that I heard in there was a ringing endorsement of what you have on this roster is a solid starting option for you on the offensive line.
No, I mean Jalen Duncan, Nicholas Petitfrere. I think those are projects. Those are guys that he sees something in them, and he hopes that Bill can get the most out of them. But I don't think that means they're not going to address that position. I think that was more so because even if you look at Jalen Duncan, I think if you can get, those two guys in particular, they should battle. They should battle for that right tackle position, knowing that you can swing one of them left if you need to. If indeed, you whether you address it through free agency to left tackle or you address it in the draft, whether it be your first pick in the first round or your second pick in the second round, if something happens to that said person, like he goes down for a few plays or a game, now Jalen Duncan can swing back over the left. But I think, and I've said this, listen, there's only this, people look at this offensive line and say, well, they got to rebuild all 5 spots. No, you don't. That's not what you do. That's not the business. Football is not in the business of replacing 5 starters at the offensive line position. What they do is they earmark guys, left tackle, which is important, the center, which is important. Mm-hmm. Let's get those 2 guys solidified. Let's work with the guys that have already been here that have shown talent. Duncan, Nicholas, and guys like that. Let's work with them and see if we can get the most out of them. Because
with no guarantee that those are your starters.
No guarantee, but what it does is as long as I can solidify this left side, as long as no one gets hurt and these guys play more and more together, things are going to typically work out because there's no offensive line. Well, there may be like 1 or 2. Philly at one point, and I think the Dallas Cowboys, where you had 3, 4 Pro Bowlers or All Pros. That's not offensive linemen. Typically, you have 1 or 2 Pro Bowlers, maybe 1 All Pro, and the other guys are just strong links to a chain. Mm-hmm. They don't get the notoriety, but they go out there each and every week and they do their job, and they do it at a level that you don't worry about. That's what they want. They want that outstanding left tackle. They want that leader in their center. Peter's going to develop, but they want to develop some good, sound players on the right side that you don't have to worry about.
We'll continue this conversation. Willy Donich will join the show as well. We'll get into your phones and your reaction from what we heard from head coach Brian Callahan. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. Caroline, Willy, D-Mase, 1025-1063 The Game.
We're at Bridgestone tonight, and the Predators play Ottawa, which we will believe they will get their 6th win. So, people, I know when you're betting, if you're going to bet on the game tonight, you need to do it with our partner, Zen Sports. And I'm excited to tell you about their introductory promotion available to all new customers in Tennessee. It's the No Danger First Wager. When you sign up for a Zen Sports account, you will receive up to $1,000 No Danger First Wager. When you place your first bet on Zen Sports, you will be reimbursed for the amount of that bet if it loses up to $1,000. Plus, Zen Sports has launched a new VIP program for the premier bettors of Tennessee. If you think you might qualify, then listen up. The VIP program is by invite only. So if you feel that your Zen Sports play qualifies for the VIP consideration, check out the program details and apply at zensports.com/VIP. No other sports book will offer you a premier sports betting experience with 24/7 top-tier customer support and bigger and better action than Zen Sports. So what are you waiting for, bettors? Get going and download their app at zensports.com today. Zen Sports, betting just got better. Remember, Gambling problems, call 1-800-889-9789. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 years or older to bet here in Tennessee. Typically in the NFL when it comes to the offseason.
Yeah, it's you have to reach out to guys. You have to talk to them. There's a lot of guys. The benefit of being in Nashville is a lot of guys live in town, and so I've seen quite a few guys in the building over the couple of weeks. We are allowed to have conversations. They obviously can't be of schematic and football nature. It's more of a get to know you conversation. but it's been great. I've reached out. I haven't hit everybody yet. It's hard to get everyone all the time. I've missed a bunch of guys back and forth. But the guys that I have talked to hopefully are spreading the same message of, I want guys to come in and talk to me. And you always hear coaches say, hey, my door's always open. I've been places where that's been said. It's not necessarily always true. But I live that. My door is open. I want guys to come talk to me. I want to get to know them. I'm trying to build relationships because those are the most important part of this whole process is all guys want to know that you got their back and you care about them and you have their best interest at heart.
Coach Brian Callahan, who joined us earlier. If you missed it, you can find it on your preferred podcast platform and stream on all of our socials. Caroline, Willy, D-Mase. We're broadcasting from the Spring Hill Heating and Cooling Game Nashville studios, keeping your home feeling comfortable all year round. Today, our Spring Hill Heating and Cooling Game Nashville studio is Barrel House at Bridgestone Arena. Predators taking on the Ottawa Senators tonight, and we have Willy back in the building.
Hello,
Welcome
peeps.
back, Willy D.
Yeah, great to be home. It's great to be home.
Yes, man. You've just been on a whirlwind here.
Yes, we got back yesterday afternoon, and then I have to tell you the hardest thing when you've been on the Pacific time zone for about a week straight, which is what we were. That wake up call first morning back, where it's like 5:30 Pacific time, 7:30 Nashville time. It's a rude awakening. It's a rude awakening, but we made it. We made it.
Going back to Cali.
Yeah. Cali was good. Cali was good. Yeah.
Cali was good for everybody.
Yes.
All parties.
No question about it.
Players and coaches, obviously, and Nashville Predator fans who may have made the trip there, or the fans here who got a chance to see the games. It was much needed.
There were a lot of Predator fans in Vegas. A lot in Vegas.
Oh wow.
It's just such an easy. We were walking around the day before the game and bumped into some Predator fans. They're like, "I know where you guys are going." We're like, "What are you talking about?" They're like, "You're going to the hockey game." I was like, "You're right." They didn't have the Predators gear on. It was the day before the game, so it was kind of a surprise. But then at the rink, you notice you get around the bowl right before the team comes out for warm-ups. They're all standing around the glass in the correct shade of gold, as I like to say, because Vegas has got their own thing of gold down there.
Gold, yes.
So that was great to see. Even in the random California, teams, you still see some Predator fans that make the trip. Like they went out and saw a couple games, stayed out there that weekend. You never know, but it was fun to see. It's good energy right now. And Andrew Burnett said downstairs, he goes, I want to look at this almost like an extension of the road trip, because this is their 4th game in 6 nights. Travel all day yesterday. You didn't have time to really get all your bearings coming home. So almost keep that same mentality here. The continuity has been a big key. They've had the same lineup, same line combination, same defense pairings for every single game. This is the first time all year that they've been able to do that, because most of the time it's not even because of injuries or anything. It's just been because they can't find the right combination. But right now they have 4 lines that all seem to have good chemistry.
It was a great road trip for the Predators, and the feelings are good. It's nice to have hockey and games that mean something, games that you are in a playoff push. So Predators taking on the Ottawa Senators tonight. We'll get into some Predators talk here, but first I wanted to get into your phones and your thoughts. 615-737-1025 is our phone number, and our phone lines are driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Some of your reaction to what you heard from Brian Callahan on our show earlier. Ben Texan says, it sounds like Brian Callahan leans towards guys that will score touchdowns, receiver or Bowers in round 1. But if Levis is not as good as Burrow, that strategy could hurt. There's a lot of quarterbacks that aren't as good as Joe Burrow.
No,
There's only one Joe Burrow, and that's for a reason. I don't think that that's necessarily the case. And please correct me if you feel differently. I think it's less about the specific player and specific quarterback and how good they are, but more of a philosophy. I mean, we've seen quarterbacks that just frankly aren't as good as Joe Burrow be elevated by the pieces around them. Jalen Hurts, I think, was elevated because of the pass catchers around him, and also pretty good offensive line. Tua.
Yes.
You bring Tyreek Hill into Miami, it looks like all of a sudden a very different Tua and a very different Miami offense. So I think that the philosophy applies more to just players than Joe Burrow.
Yeah, it does. Listen, and Coach Callahan said it. Listen, I know the system works. I've seen it in other places. Mm-hmm. So if it doesn't work, or if it doesn't seem like it's working, it's not the system that's at fault. we have to get the guys and the players that match the system that we're trying to run. And he talked specifically about the tight end. He seemed like he was more excited about the tight end position than any position, because he talked about Chickaconko and what he was able to do. He talked about Josh Wiley and his potential as a player and his role possibly expanding within his offense. So it's whichever way I think the Titans go in the first round. I think it will be a position they believe will help them immediately. Whether it be, I don't think they're going tight end, because the way he talked about Chickaconko and Josh Wiley, I think he believes he has his two young tight ends of the future. So whether it's not tight end, wide receiver or tackle, whichever way they choose to go, I think it's going to be the best player for this specific team.
Do you think they're set at tight end with Chick and Josh Wiley?
I think they need another veteran guy. They don't need
Jackie Harris.
Yeah, like a Jackie Harris type of guy, a guy that can come in and just show some stability, steadiness at that position, because it's so young.
You didn't have consistency from either of those young tight ends.
No,
I don't think that you're set there.
And Brian said, listen, from his experience, it takes tight ends 3 to 4 years to develop into the tight end that they're ultimately going to be. Why? Because they have so much responsibility, like a running back. We're talking about blitz protection, just blocking. Then they got to go out and route. So it's a lot of things that the tight end position has to do before they even get out to catch a pass. So, but to me, I think he's excited about that position. I just think they need to hire. They just need to bring in a veteran guy to sort of level everything out.
I also commend Brian Cal. I didn't hear the whole interview, but the clips we played, think about where he is. He's at the Combine. He's done a gazillion interviews already. He's talked a lot, but he just seems very engaging, very excited to do interviews, talk about his team. I think there's something to be said for that. I think sometimes you get coaches that are like, when is this over? I've been doing this all day. I got stuff to do. We're at the Combine, but he looks like he is valuing the time to talk to the fans, talk to the media, and get the message out there. I like that. There's a lot riding on that first pick. Yeah. That's the thing. Whichever way they go, 50% of the people are going to say, I don't understand why they didn't take a wide receiver.
Yeah.
If they take a wide receiver, how can you not draft an offensive tackle? I don't know what you're doing. How can you not draft an offensive? Did you see who's playing offensive line? There's going to be that crew, right, that's going to go the other way. You can only pick one guy. But, man, there's a lot riding on the pick. They need that pick to be a foundation piece. There's no doubt about it.
I think Rand needs that pick to be a foundation piece.
It will really help his, notch on the belt, like jump him in, like I am the man.
Like we said, the clock started on Rand Carthon as soon as Mike Vrabel got fired.
Of course.
The owner's got a short fuse, so that pick's important for the team. That pick's important for Rand Carthon. Speaking of Rand Carthon, we also heard from him. He spoke with the media earlier today. And whenever you hear from, GMs, coaches, or people in the know, I always wonder, are they just saying something or are they telling you something? And I think Rand Carthon was telling us something. I think Rand Carthon was telling us where the team is leaning in the first round. And we'll get into that coming up next. Caroline, Willy, D-Mase, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Caroline, Willy, D-Maze, 1025, 1063 The Game, and The Game Nashville app. We are streaming live on Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook Live every single day. We're live out here at Barrel House at Bridgestone Arena because the Predators take on the Ottawa Senators tonight at home. Finally, back at home after the red-hot and very long road trip. But we'll have all of your pregame coverage starting at 6 p.m., and puck drop is at 7 p.m. So we caught up with Brian Callahan earlier in our show, right at the top of the show, so you can find that on your preferred podcast platform or on YouTube, on Twitter, and all of our socials. But we also heard from Ran Carthon. He joined the Chase and Big Joe show today, and he also spoke with the media in Indianapolis. Of course, Brian Callahan and Ran Carthon both at the NFL Scouting Combine all week. And before we get into specifics, first of all, my overall impression of Ran Carthon's press conference, I thought it was really good. You know, I at least was criticizing Ran Carthon and maybe the preparedness and maybe the messaging from the post Mike Vrabel firing press conference. It was a mess. Like it was a mess. I thought this press conference was really great. I thought there was a level of confidence that Ran Carthon was exuding in that press conference that maybe I didn't necessarily feel in the post Mike Vrabel press conference. So that first and foremost, I thought it was a really good press conference and good messaging to the team.
Yeah, it was. Now it seems like, he's confident in who he's hired as head coach. He's confident in who they've hired as assistant coaches within that coaching staff. So now his approach seems a little bit different prior to, Vrabel's firing. That press conference was a debacle. And listen, I don't blame that on him. I don't.
Amy put him in that position.
Yeah, Amy put him in that position. And what was he supposed to say? People act as if he was supposed to say something contrary to the message that was already given to him. He works for someone that owns a team. Anybody that works for someone else, if they give you a message to put out there, if you love your job, you're going to put that message out. If you don't like your job, hell, you're not. That's just the way it is. He likes his job, so he's going to stay on message, and I believe he believes the message that Amy is preaching. And it's like a trickle-down effect. So to me, this was a sort of good start for him. Headed into the NFL draft, being in Indianapolis, taking questions from those in Indianapolis, and then coming on this station with Big Joe and Chase to answer more questions. So I like what I heard, and you just want to, as we continue to go with this process of the draft and free agency, I think you just want to hear more of what Ran is thinking in regards to the players they're going to bring in here, because ultimately, he's going to be graded based upon how the players play. That's basically it. Like, listen, he said it. Hey, if they play great, then I keep my job. If they don't play great, then eventually I'm going to be looking for another job. And it's not just you. Everybody's going to be looking for another job. Yeah. But you may be the first to go because you were here, for 1 year, but you were here with the last regime. So. Right. Moving forward, I'm sure we'll start to hear more and more of sort of the philosophy in their approach. They want to try to keep it all in-house right now because you don't want to tip your hand, one way or the other in regards to what you're looking for in the draft, players you're earmarking, whether it be the draft or the free agency.
But I think he did. I think I cracked the code.
Okay, I was very intrigued when you threw this out there. I got to hear this.
I think I cracked the code.
Okay.
And I think I know what the Titans are leaning in the first round. And I think they want a receiver. And I say that for a few reasons. First and foremost, Brian Callahan, I'm not having a good day with names today, so let me apologize in advance. First and foremost, one reason why I think the Titans are taking a receiver is how Ran Carthon described the offensive line class. This was Ran.
Again, I think if you look at it strategically, it's about, the value, right? So if you're sitting there and there's a receiver there, knowing that there's a deep O-line class, it's like, all right, where can we, supplement this position, later? So it's about playing those two parts off of each other, whether that's in free agency as well, and in the draft. So it's about trying to mix and match those two pieces.
Is it not kind of obvious? Sitting there at 7, there's a receiver. We know it's a deep offensive line class. I can read between the lines. If there's a receiver there and it's a deep offensive line class, we're taking the receiver, and then we're taking the offensive lineman later in the draft. Second reason is how Ran described some other teams in the league. This was Ran Carthon.
Well, again, I've never been in the draft room with Coach, with Big Coach, and how he sees it. But definitely take his advice. But ultimately, when we build it, we're going to build it for the best way of the entire organization, and not just so much focus on him and what he's looking for.
So, and Rand Carthon was also touching on the speed across the league. And
yeah.
D-Mase, this is something that you talk about a lot. So we need to get faster. We need to be a speedier team. He mentioned the Miami Dolphins. And he said, when we played the Dolphins, I was just in awe of their speed. I said, we need to get up to that level offensively and, of course, defensively as well to keep up with the speed. But offensively, we need to be as fast as some other teams. You think they were talking about the offensive line, or was he talking about Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill? I think he was talking about the speed of Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill, and that being one thing that really stood out to him of where the Titans are probably deficient, where the Titans need to get better. It's speed. You talk about it all the time. You don't get speed from left tackles necessarily. You get your speed from your speedy wide receivers. And finally, Rand was asked about kind of the philosophy of bringing in players that fit Brian Callahan's system, about adding playmakers in wide receivers. This was Rand Carth on the wide receiver position.
Well, I mean, if you look at where Callie comes from, right, you have 3 to 4 guys that are in there a lot, and that are producers, and that's the receiver room is where we're going to continue to look to add some playmakers. Like I said before, we're looking to add playmakers, on both sides of the ball. We need to have people that can put the ball in the paint, and score points for us, and we need people that can take the ball away and create more opportunities for us to score.
Playmakers, players that can find the end zone, talking about where Brian Callahan came from. The poster child for taking the receiver over the offensive lineman is the Cincinnati Bengals. What is the Cincinnati Bengals' strength outside of the quarterback? It's the right wide receiver room. I think all of those things combined, it just feels to me that they are leaning toward receiver. In addition to the fact that Brian Callahan said on our show earlier, my philosophy traditionally has been touchdown scorers versus non-touchdown scorers.
But what gives teams opportunity to stay in the game when they're playing the Cincinnati Bengals? Because they can get to the quarterback.
For sure.
Because they cannot block.
But what do you think about what Rand said there? Does it sound receiver-y, or am I looking too far into it?
It doesn't sound, to me, again, this is the cloak and dagger phase.
Yep. I was thinking that same thing when you said it last hour. Yeah. And he played that clip. That's what I'm thinking. You've got to try to throw all of these things out there over the next few months because you don't want to play your hand. But maybe he's coming out with the real thing first, and then the next week you're like, oh, we got to have that offense. I'm like, man, you need an offensive line to win in this league.
Yeah, you do. But listen, you need pass catchers in.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, this draft is deep at receiver as well. So because listen, Brian said it. Listen, when you're talking offensive linemen, when you're talking tackles in particular, you only get them one or two ways. You can get receivers multiple ways. You can only get a surefire guy one or two ways. Either you're going to overpay for him because he's a free agent, but more than likely, if he's a free agent, he ain't leaving out of that team's building because they know what they got at that left tackle position, and that's a hard position to replace. When you got a player at that position, you don't want to have to replace it, at least for a 10-year period. And then you either draft that guy high, So
isn't that also the same with receivers, though?
No, it's not, because I can go down a list of second round and third round receivers that have excelled high in this league. You can find your receiver because I think college football more than anything caters toward the receiver and the quarterback. It doesn't cater toward the offensive lineman. So when you see these receivers, because these offenses are multiple in college and they're multiple in the NFL, they just put me in space, get me the ball very quickly, and let me do my damage after I catch the ball. So to me, you can find those guys in the second round, in the third round. St. Brown out of Detroit, he's a second-round pick, and he's one of the most electrifying young receivers in the National Football League. So there are other ways you can find a receiver. Now, listen, they may not be the 95s like Neighbors, Harrison, and Adunze, but what if they're 90s? What if they're 89s? I could still work with that and still get my explosive receiver in the second or third round. So I think you could look at it that way, Caroline. I get it. But I'm more in a line of thinking it's just cloak and dagger right now.
And
they need it, but it's like, okay, tackle, we'll throw it out there.
And I feel like it's harder to find the offensive lineman these days for the opposite reason what you're saying. Like all these 7-on-7s, the development of the game in our country. There's so many non-pad like summer leagues where
it's basketball on grass. That's all it is.
Instead of these football players playing other sports, playing baseball, playing summer basketball, they're going to these camps and learning all the intricacies of running routes and stuff. That never used to happen in my generation. There was no such thing as a 7-on-7 league. Nobody did that. They just played other sports until it was time to come back for football in August, right? So now that's changing. So it's developing more good wide receivers, I think. And it's done the opposite to the offensive line, is with all of the spread and all of the way college teams a lot of times are attacking, you don't play the offensive line style that you have to adjust to, so it's probably harder to find offensive linemen. So I agree with that philosophy, but each draft it's different, right?
Yeah.
You weigh that with, hey, this year you might have 3 or 4 premier wide receivers, and the offensive linemen are there, but maybe it's not that premier guy that's worth the 7th pick in the draft. That's where the two sides have. That's where the discussion's going to be, I think.
Every draft is different, and also keep in mind who you have coaching the offensive linemen, because we talked about that with Brian Callahan as well,
Yes.
and Rand Carthon mentioned that in his press conference of if we feel like we can draft, and he didn't say this verbatim, I'm just kind of talking about the idea of what he said. You have the 38th overall pick, your first pick in the second round. If you can take an offensive lineman that, let's say his grade is an 86, if you feel like you have a coach that can bring him to a 92, I'll take that.
Yeah.
And then you'll take the 98% graded wide receiver with the 7th overall pick is maybe their line of thinking of, we have a high pick in the second round. We view this, as Rand Carthon said, as a deep offensive line draft, and we really believe in our offensive line coach's ability to evaluate and to elevate the talent of our offensive linemen. Because I would agree that we talked about this same theory and the same philosophy in the 2021 draft when 2022 draft, 2020.
Who are we talking
One
about?
draft. Jamar Chase.
Yes, 2021.
2021 draft.
Yep.
Thank you. In the 2021 draft of, well, yeah, it's great and all if you have an elite pass catcher, but if the quarterback can't get the ball out on time, if he's on his butt half the time, then he can't get the ball to that pass catcher. I totally understand that line of thinking, but I think you have to look at it differently. Like when I asked Brian Callahan about it, he said, look, we can't compare it completely apples to apples to my situation in Cincinnati, but having a Bill Callahan and having this draft that Rand calls a deep offensive line draft, I think that kind of adds to it.
Yeah, it does. And whether they choose to go the route of drafting a receiver first and then coming back and drafting that tackle, a lot of it, I think, is predicated on what they do in free agency. Do we believe they're going to get one of these, 1 or 2 top tackles that are free agents this year? Possibly not, because teams are going to try to pay them what they want because they know, again, if you have that guy at that position, you don't want to let him leave the building unless he's asking for something that is just, just sort of out of this stratosphere in regards to his money. But other than that, I think you sign a guy back to your team and you kind of go from there. So let's see what they do in regards to free agency first, because if they can somehow, some way land a good tackle, young tackle in free agency and get Bill to work with them, then maybe, like you said, they can go another direction in the draft with getting a wide receiver at that first-round pick. But, if you don't get that tackle in free agency, man, it's going to be hard to go into the draft and say Alt is there and maybe a Dunze's there or Neighbors there. One of the two are going to be more than likely there.
Yeah.
It's going to be hard to kind of, look at that and then draft a receiver. He better have immediate success.
That's a tough decision.
He better have immediate success. And that quarterback better look totally different with him on this roster, because if he doesn't, you set your franchise back even further. I know Bill Callahan is a hell of an offensive line coach, but if I could draft a guy that is ready to come in here and start like an Alt or Fashanu, and I don't draft them, and I watch as the season go, and those guys turn into all pro players or Pro Bowlers, it's like, man, what did we do?
It reminds me of the philosophy that, and Floyd Reese used to laugh about this. John McClain would talk year after year about when they had Mike Munchak as their offensive line coach for a long time. And I think they have absolutely had that attitude of let's use the earlier picks to get other positions, because we've got Mike Munchak, and we'll find the guy in the third round that he'll turn into a really good player. And apparently, this is, Floyd used to laugh like, haha, say whatever you want. But like apparently Mike Munchak was, can we draft an offensive lineman in the first round, Floyd? My goodness. But if you look through the years, they had success. Michael Roos was not a first-round pick. Big Country Stewart was not a first-round pick. Kevin Long on the Super Bowl team was a seventh-round pick who started the first year. So you can go right down the list. Benji Olsen, I don't think, not a first-round pick,
Benji
right?
was a third-round pick, I think, third or fourth.
So they found guys that they turned into very solid pieces on an offensive line because they felt like they could coach them up.
But you got to understand, too, you said something that is so true, Willie. But back then, the offenses in the college ranks were geared more toward the style of offense that they run in the NFL. Like offensive linemen got down and they run block, like serious run block. They did their, 3 steps back and pass block. So they did both of them. In this
But you still look at the college football. No, the best offenses in college football have the best offensive lines. Washington won the Joe Moore Award. LSU had the number one offense in the country. They were a Joe Moore Award finalist.
Right, but that doesn't necessarily translate into production at the NFL level. It's like these guys are doing so much pass blocking that it takes them a while to start to develop into run blockers. This league, you have to be able to block the run. Yeah, you're going to pass block. We understand that. But you got to be able to run block. You got to be able to, sort of pass things off, pick up twists and stunts, stuff like that, that I think because of the way the college game has gone, because you don't have enough time during the offseason to get together and develop these offensive linemen, that's the one position that has suffered the most through all of this, because these guys, majority of these guys are not coming in NFL ready. They got to relearn a lot of stuff or learn a lot of stuff they just didn't learn in college.
And, I understand everyone has their own philosophy. I understand the idea of you have to protect the quarterback. You have to protect the quarterback. But it's not necessarily about my philosophy or your philosophy or anyone else's philosophy. I'm just telling you what Brian Callahan said his philosophy was. I'm just saying what Ran Carthon said. And what Ran Carthon said sounded very wide receiver centric. Does that mean that they're married to receiver? I don't think that they should be, because in that scenario, D-Mase, if Joe Alt's sitting there at 7, that makes your decision really, really difficult. So I don't think that it's an absolute. And I don't think that it's we're going to take a wide receiver no matter what, even if it's the 16th best receiver in the draft and we take them at 7. I think it's just where maybe their minds are at right now. That if Joe Alt gets taken, let's say hypothetically at 5 by the Chargers, the Titans are totally fine. It sounds like sticking at 7 and taking a receiver. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. We'll get into your thoughts on that, plus what Ran Carthon had to say about the offensive line, kind of what we've been talking about the Bill Callahan effect. How much Bill Callahan can elevate offensive linemen. Is that the right approach? We'll get into that coming up next. And we're brought to you by Zen Sports. Start earning cash rewards on your bets today. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-889-9789. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 or older and in Tennessee to bet. Caroline, Willy, D-Mase, 102.5, 106.3, The Game and The Game Nashville app. We're live out here at Barrel House at Bridgestone Arena because the Predators are taking on the Ottawa Senators tonight. And you can tune into 94.9 The Fan tonight as well as Vanderbilt men's basketball takes on Arkansas on the road. Pre-game at 7:30 p.m., tip-off at 8 p.m. with coverage also available on the 94.9 The Fan app and at 949thefan.com. So Rand Carthon, Titans general manager, he was on the Chase and Big Joe show earlier, and of course you can go back and find that on your preferred podcast platforms. And he also spoke with the media in Indianapolis. He had a press conference that I thought was great. I thought it was informative, and I thought he felt confident, maybe not as confident as it was after Mike Vrabel got fired, which he was just thrown to the wolves by Amy Adams-Strunk. But I felt, to me, like the vibe that I got, how Rand Carthon was talking about being faster, how he was talking about how Miami had so much speed that he wants the Titans to have as much speed as that, how deep this offensive line class is. I feel like Rand Carthon and the Titans are leading wide receiver in the first round. Another reason why I kind of felt that way was when Rand Carthon was talking about the offensive line and kind of the Bill Callahan effect. This was Rand Carthon earlier this morning.
We got a guy named Bill Callahan, a.k.a. Big Coach, who's one of the best in the business. And I really wish you guys could have seen his profile tape, meeting. It was a clinic. It was a clinic, and everyone left out of there minds blown and coming to the realization that we still got a lot to learn, to come in and what it's going to take to play for him. But I think for a guy like that who's been such a strong developer, of talent at the O-line position, it gives us a little leeway, to bring some guys in and him having a plan on how to develop those guys and get them out on the field. No, I mean, it's weighing what's the best option for us now and where we're taking that, right? So you would want, if you're picking in the top 10, you want about as close to a surefire thing that you can find, which we won't know that for another 3 years anyway. But then there are spaces later in the draft where, you could take a developmental guy because you have someone that could develop him.
Okay, again, that was Rand Carthon on Bill Callahan. Kind of just continues the idea of it. We can find a good offensive lineman because we feel confident in our coach and being able to get the most out of that player. Now, I'm not anti any player within the realm of what makes sense at 7 or in the first round. If it's an offensive lineman, great. Then maybe you found your left tackle of the future. Ideally, you did. I would kind of like a receiver because that's sexier to talk about, and you also need that. But still, I'm not anti anything. But I did wonder, is that the best approach? Because Bill Callahan's still not a magician. He can only work with so much, right? And that's not to say that you can't find a really good offensive lineman in the second round. It's not just elite players in the first and a whole bunch of scrubs in the rest of the draft. That's not what I'm saying. But is it almost putting too many eggs in Bill Callahan's basket? Because you still need talented players for him to work with.
Yeah, you do. And I think this is all a process. Brian even said it, the big picture, the long-term goals that we have when I talked about the offense and how, people in Nashville are going to want a microwave offense. We've struggled the last couple of years, that they struggled the last couple of years with their offense. And now you bring in this offensive-minded head coach. We want production right away.
Be faster.
Exactly. When in actuality, it's going to take some time. And I believe that whichever way they choose to go with, whether it be a wide receiver or tackle. Again, I don't think either position, if you chose to go one way or the other, I don't think it's wrong. I think what has to happen is if you choose to go left rather than right, then that left, we better see it like right away in that left, because we're always going to be comparing that to what you didn't draft and watching that guy at his respective team and how he's doing. If Adunze's there or Neighbors there and you choose to go alt, great, we got alt. But if we see, middle of the season and Adunze and Neighbors are balling out, we're going to say, man, should we have went that way instead of getting this guy? We got the best in the business as far as coaching, and Bill, couldn't he have coached a second rounder or a third rounder up? Well, don't have a third round pick right now, but couldn't he have coached a free agent up or Nicholas or one of these guys up to play that position and then go and get a receiver? because those guys are balling. So I can see both sides of it. But right now,
Totally.
I'm not going to lean one way or the other. And if you do, there's nothing wrong with that. You're just going by what you're hearing, what you're listening to, and what that is causing you to lean to. I'm
Do
like,
we agree it at least
yeah.
sounds very wide receiver-esque?
No,
or do you
that's
feel
what I'm
different?
saying.
Okay.
No, it sounds that
Today.
way, but I know that, to me, I want to see free agency first. What are you doing free agency? That will give me a better understanding of which way you're more likely to lean.
Yeah.
What they said, it does sound like offensive guy, wide receiver, but what if you address that with a big-name wide receiver through free agency? You know, you maybe, say if you get a Mike Evans or Pittman, one of these guys, are you still going to look for that in the draft in the first round? I don't know.
And also, I would be careful not to overpromise because that's going to be a story. Bill Callahan, offensive line. You ought to have a good offensive line.
Yeah.
I'd be careful to not overpromise because you can only do so much. The guys, it's up to the guys. Like
You
we
said
had,
it,
we
he's
had
not a
that,
magician.
He has to have
Right.
talent around him.
We talked about this with Burks, right?
Yeah.
At some point, it's not coaching up Burks. It's
Yeah.
Burks doing the job and making the breakthrough, right? It's way more on that than the coach becoming this magical sorcerer that just waves this you can do everything you can, but it's still the player that's got to get it done. And I think the same applies to the offensive line, right? I think Callahan, having him is a big strength for sure.
Totally.
But I'd be careful if I'm the GM saying, hey, check this out. We got this great offensive line. I know he's excited about it, too.
Yeah.
He wants to tell you about it. But at the same time, it's like I don't want to – because they got a long way to go. They could be a lot better but still not have a great offensive line, right? It's not going to be just completely magically fixed in 1 year probably. It'd be nice if it did.
And if it did, I mean, from your mouth to God's ears,
Yeah.
really. I mean,
You're starting at the bottom. You're starting with maybe the worst offensive line of any team that was halfway competitive last year.
Probably.
Maybe not Carolina or something like that. But I'm talking about,
But
they're
Carolina
picking
was pretty
seventh for a
awful,
reason.
too.
When you
Yeah.
start listening, what was the number one reason they're picking seventh?
offensive line.
Offensive line is number one, I
Yeah.
think. Number two might be, Tannehill was hurt. And then you can go on down the list and we could debate. But number one, I think any Titans fan would answer. Offensive line was brutal.
Yeah.
That's
Brutal.
a very good point that you bring up, Willie, because let's say just the vibe that I'm getting. If I had to guess today, if I'm going to take it to the bank today, just based off of what Rand Carthon has said, it sounds like the Titans are going wide receiver at 7, offensive lineman at 38. Now, anything can happen. Crazy things happen. We still have yet to go through free agency, but just the vibe that I'm getting now, that's what it sounds like. Rand Carthon talking about, we were all blown away by the presentations that Bill Callahan had, that he, we really believe in his development. I do too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's known as one of the best offensive line coaches, one of the most valuable assistant coaches in the NFL for a reason. But if your offensive line can't protect Will Levis, everyone's going to be looking at Rand Carthon to say, well, why didn't you draft better players? Why didn't you bring in better players? You have this great coach. Why can't the offensive line be better?
Yeah, it's going to have to be. Let's just look, up north and look at the Cincinnati Bengals, because obviously we're going to compare, even though, Brian Callahan was like, listen, that's two different situations, scenarios and whatnot. The Jamar Chase and Traylon Burks stuff is just different. But we're always going to look north because that's where he came from. That's the last team he came from.
Yeah.
And it seems like they went through the same thing that the Titans are going through now, trying to rebuild that line. Even when they did address the offensive line, they still struggled. And they didn't struggle as much as they did the year prior. But that offensive line with Cincinnati, they still struggled the next following year, even when they went out and paid the high-priced guys at tackle and went out and tried to, I think they got a tackle that year and a guard that year. They got 2 bookends, and they still struggled to protect their quarterback, and they're still struggling to protect their quarterback. Why? Because they did not address it the way that maybe they should have. They addressed the catching the football and the scoring touchdown part, but they didn't address, and they still haven't addressed the offensive line. They had an opportunity to get a guy they knew more than likely was going to be a 10-year starter at that position. They passed on him. They're getting a lot out of Jamar Chase when he's
got
healthy.
to the Super Bowl.
When he's healthy, and they went to the Super Bowl. But I go back to what happened that last play when Aaron Donald said, you know what, I'm about to play this one last play, and if I have anything to do with it, y'all won't be winning. And what happened? He ran smack dab through that offensive line that was not good enough to block that particular moment, that guy at that time. They had all the playmakers. Had he got the ball released, I'm sure he would have found Chase was wide open. Chase was wide open running like a 5-yard hitch for a first down. You get the first down, you kick a field goal, you win the game. But they couldn't get the ball off, and it was like 2 seconds. And Aaron Donald was in his face. That's what I'm talking about. But those are little small things because we can kind of go back and say, well, remember Jamar Chase, he caught this pass. So we can kind of go back.
There's more than one way to win. But that pick has to hit. That's the key.
Yes.
Yeah.
You look smart if whichever way you go, if that player turns out well. I remember Jamar Chase after the Titans smoked them here, right? But Burrow was limited the way he could move. The Titans were all over him throughout that whole game.
He was a statue.
And remember, they were kind of stuck, and there were a lot of negative questions going at the Bengals at the time, and they were asking Chase. He said, where are you open? What's the story? Why are you not doing it? He goes, I'm open on every play.
Yeah,
but we just can't, we can't do anything right now because we can't protect the quarterback and all this stuff. So you can be open every play, but that doesn't mean you're going to get the ball enough. If you can't protect the quarterback.
In terms of the offensive line discussion, comparing this situation to the Bengals, what did the Bengals not have that you do have? Bill Callahan.
Yeah.
I don't know. Frankly, I don't know who Cincinnati's offensive line coach is.
Either.
But I know it's not Bill Callahan.
No.
And I know that it's not the same kind of caliber as Bill Callahan. So I see the idea of what Rand was saying there of, look, we can probably afford to wait on an offensive lineman because we feel that we have a coach that can get the most out of that offensive lineman. But again, Bill Callahan is not a magician. He cannot turn, me into a starting left tackle. He's not a magician. Another thing that I saw made headlines that Rand Carthon said today. We talk about, take a receiver at 7, take a lineman at 7. Maybe it's not even at 7. And we'll get into that coming up next. Caroline, Willy, D-Mase. Hey, Preds fans, don't miss tomorrow night's Smashville live show at Brewhouse South in Cool Springs at 6 p.m. You can see your Predators star players up close and personal, plus get autographs and pictures. This week's special guests are Michael McCarron and Dante Fabro. Smashville Live is brought to you by the Black Abbey Brewing Company and ESPN Bet Sportsbook.
Okay, time to get you the message out there on Loan Pronto. Once again, they're helping people get in a better financial position. The mortgage rates have come down, and it's time for you to take advantage. 2 ways to do that. If you have a good primary mortgage rate, then keep that mortgage rate. If you need cash, they can get you the Express Equity line of credit, and they can get that money in just a matter of days. Just a matter of days. Thousands of dollars, and you can address your financial needs. Credit card bills, college tuition payments, all their high-interest loans, whatever that might be, they've got that for you. It's a great tool, and you can keep that primary mortgage intact. If you have a higher primary mortgage rate on your house payment, you can get out of that right now, and they can save you hundreds of dollars each month with lower payments, and you can even skip your next 2 mortgage payments. So ask about that. They can get that mortgage rate down for you. So do that, refi now, and don't even pay the closing costs most of the time. Call today, 615-499-5780. That's 615-499-5780, or go to loanpronto.com. Equal housing lender, NMLS 1661781, subject to lender approval.
Caroline, Willy, D-Mase. Tune in to 94.9 The Fan today as Vanderbilt baseball takes on Indiana State at Hawkins Field with pregame beginning at 4:15 p.m. and first pitch at 4:30. Coverage also available on 94.9 The Fan app and at 949thefan.com. We're live out here at Barrel House at Bridgestone Arena. Predators are in action tonight. Finally back at home after 5 games on the road. A great 5 games on the road. So we heard from Ran Carthon. He had the press conference in Indianapolis at the NFL Combine. One thing in particular that he said that made some headlines about what the Titans could do with their draft position. This was Ran Carthon about the number 7 overall pick.
I like 7, but I'm open. You know, we have to listen to any offers that may come. You know, our long-term goal is to build this football team into a consistent winner, and the way you do that is building through the draft. And off of that, you need draft picks to do that. So would definitely be willing to listen, but it has to make sense for us.
That's the right answer.
Yeah.
I mean, that is textbook the perfect answer, I think, about moving up, trading back, about moving draft positions, I think.
Yeah, it is. You can't be – listen, if they were in dire need for a quarterback, then you may not want to move out of that 7th pick. Actually, you may want to try to move up to get one of these quarterbacks. But, fortunately, they're not in a position where they are in dire need for a quarterback. They believe they have one. So with that being the case, if someone approaches you that may want to, say if the draft sort of take a quirky sort of turn, and guys, because it happens every year, guys end up getting drafted a little bit higher than what a lot of people expect. Now, all of a sudden, you got a team, sitting at 10, 11, 12, that think, oh, my goodness, we may be able to get our quarterback, but we got to do it now. We got to move now. They may be, because they're desperate to move up, they may offer you something that is just, you can't pass it up. And you're not moving out of the top 15. And you still may either be able to get your pass catcher or your left tackle, somebody at that position, or your defensive back. Because Rand talked about needing someone that can stop these high-powered offenses as well. So, you can't be married to that 7th pick, but you're not just going to move out of that spot just because, just because you want more picks. No, it got to make sense.
Yeah.
You got to be offering something that I just can't refuse. And if I can't refuse it, then I think everybody in the room understands, hey, we got to make this move. We get more picks, and we're still in a position to get the guy that we want.
I'd love to get extra picks somewhere in there, even if it's not moving from 7, somewhere in there.
They still need a 3rd-round pick, I think.
That would be nice. And then even for down the road, if there's a way to get an extra one here and there, I think that's important. They need kicks at the can, to find more foundational players. Get that nucleus of players up there that aren't costing you a lot. Like you can't put a value on draft picks, even if they don't end up being great players. Just good players that aren't taking up a lot of cap space, where you could really pinpoint the rest of those dollars to invest in that next contract or find the right free agent.
And I saw a bunch of texts in the text line of, if the Titans move back, I'm no longer going to be a Titans fan.
You're still going to be a Titans
You're going to be a Titans fan.
Yeah.
Drama queen. But Ran Carthon's not talking to the fans. Ran Carthon's not talking to me. Ran Carthon is not talking to you. Ran Carthon is talking to 31 other general managers across the National Football League. Some general managers across the National Football League that, hey, I'll pick up the phone.
Yeah.
I'll see what it would cost to move up to 7. And all it takes is Ran Carthon to say, no, that's not enough for us.
Exactly.
Because maybe Minnesota's listening. And Minnesota's sitting at 11. Minnesota might need a quarterback. Minnesota might not re-sign Kirk Cousins. Minnesota might be desperate enough to talk themselves into taking J.J. McCarthy at 7. And Minnesota might be desperate enough to offer you their 1st-round pick next year. I don't know. Crazy things could happen. So Ran Carthon is at least opening the lines of communication. We're not closed off to anything. If you're willing to offer us a 1 for the 7th overall pick, and all we have to do is move back 4 spots, I'll take that. I'll take that deal. But that's up to Rand Carthon, and he's at least keeping the lines of communication open. I think that's the right thing to do at this point. All you can say is no.
Yeah, I mean, you can't, you may not want to sell your house, but if somebody offers you, $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 over asking, or $1 million over what you paid for it,
See
it's
ya.
like, okay, I bought it last year or 2 years ago, and you're giving me $1 million over what I paid for it. And I don't need a real estate agent. Okay, come on.
I didn't like this house anyway.
Yeah, I didn't like it. I can find another house. And that's the way, sort of this thing is going with the 7th pick. Listen, I'm not looking to move off the 7th pick, but if you're offering me something that I know I won't be able to get any other time, then okay, let's talk. Call me, I answer. Okay, keep talking. I like what you're saying. Okay. Add another pick to it, by the way. See what you can get out of them.
Sweeten the pot a
if they're
bit.
making that call, you try to get as much out of them as you possibly can.
Play into the desperation.
Yeah.
You don't need a quarterback. You're not desperate for a quarterback.
That is the leverage.
Yeah.
That is absolutely the leverage that they can use. The one thing that I would be against is moving all the way back to the late teens or the 20s.
Yeah.
You are in more
That may
need
be
of
too far, yeah.
good players at that position in the top 10 and the top 12 than you are, the extra later round pick that you would get from moving back that far, or the first round pick next year, especially if it's a team that's picking in the late 20s or the late teens. They're probably a pretty good team.
Yeah.
And that first round pick might not be as good in the next draft. The other thing that I wanted to touch on, there was a lot that Rand was saying that I was like, yep, yes, love it. That being one of them about, my phone's on, call me if you want to call about 7. One thing that I thought Rand said, and I thought, okay, you lost me there. You lost me there. This was Rand Carthon about selecting players on the offensive line.
Well, again, I've never been in the draft room with Coach, with Big Coach, and how he sees it. But definitely take his advice. But ultimately, when we build it, we're going to build it for the best way of the entire, organization, and not just so much focus on him and what he's looking for.
Big Coach, Bill Callahan.
Yeah.
You lost me there because I view Rand's job as not picking it's not Rand's players to pick. Rand is picking Brian Callahan's players. Brian Callahan is not coaching Rand Carthon's players. So when Rand Carthon says, we're gonna take players that make sense for the team, not necessarily just what he wants. No, I think that you should be taking players that Bill Callahan wants, players that Brian Callahan wants. They're the ones that are going to be coaching these players. And if Bill Callahan is as good of a coach as we believe he is, as Rand Carthon believes he is, then you should be listening and picking the players that Bill and Brian Callahan both want.
Well, yes and no. I think he was referring to the offensive line and Bill. Yes, we will.
Yes.
Yes, we will listen to you. Yes, we respect your opinion based, on individuals we may be discussing as far as the offensive line. Okay, we have your thoughts on it. We have your response to it, how you feel. Okay, now let's go around the room. We know what Bill thinks. What do you think, Brian? What do you think? What do you think? What do you think? Okay, now if the consensus comes back and say, well, maybe the offensive line is not the best way to go, then I'm doing what's best for the team. Because everybody, this is a collaboration, a conglomerate. It's, yes, everybody may have an individual thought, but if we put all those thoughts together, because ultimately that's what it's going to come down to. It may come down to 1 or 2 players. What do you think? What do you think? What do you think? Okay, why do you think this way? Okay, let's take all this information that we got, and ultimately I got to make the decision. I'm going to make the decision that's best, not for me, not for you, Bill, but for the team on building this team, because it's not about today. This is about moving forward, because if I just get the guy you want, we get him, and this thing doesn't work out, now we're set back even more. We respect your opinion, and we're going to get some thought. We're going to get some thought to your opinion. I look at it as, like my kids, listen, y'all can come to me and y'all can say whatever y'all want to y'all can say whatever y'all want to respectfully. Y'all can discuss things, but that doesn't mean that I am then going to do what you want me to do. I'm going to think about it, talk to your mom about it. We're going to discuss it, and we're going to do what's best for everybody, not necessarily just for you. Sometimes it may be what you want. Sometimes it may not. That's a part of it. And I think Rand looks at it that way too, is, yeah, there may be times we're going to do what Bill says, or Big Coach as he calls him. There's going to be sometimes we do defer to him. But there's going to be other times where we're going to listen to him, listen to everybody else, and sort of defer to the group rather than the person.
I look at it more
That's the way I
so
see it.
in building the offensive line. Like, let's say if Bill Callahan comes to Rand and says, "Look, this left tackle free agent, we need him. This is a guy that we need. That I need this player on the offensive line. I need Rand Carthen to go in and get that player."
But what if Denard Wilson comes in and says, "Man, I need that cornerback, right? I need him. Like, we need, like, look at what we."
Then
we
you
only
get that
got-
player.
We only have, but if Bill's saying that and Denard's saying this, now I got to go to the conglomerate and say, what do we need? What do y'all say? Which side of the coin do y'all fall on? Because it's not just about you or you, it's about us. And I think that's the way Rand is approaching it. Not to say he's not going. If Bill comes inside and need that guy, he may go to Brian, and Brian say, yeah, he needs that guy. We need this guy. All right, let's make the move and get this guy. Or Denard says, we need that corner. And we go talk to Brian, and Brian said, yeah, with all these receivers in our division, we need that corner. All right, let's go get the corner. It may be situations like that. But I think more times than not, it's going to be a situation where we listen to everybody. We respect everybody's opinion, but just because we listen and respect, that doesn't mean we're going to necessarily, do what you want us to do. We may not do it now. We may choose to do it later in later rounds, or we may choose to do it through free agency. But the way this team is constructed right now, whatever decision we make, we got to make for the whole rather than the singular person or singular coach. So that's just the way I look at it. I mean, it could be something totally different.
I hear you. I look at it like the best thing for this team is good players.
Yeah, you're right.
The best thing for this team is to have more good players. Right? 615-737-1025 is the phone number. We'll get back into your thoughts on this. But the NHL trade deadline is quickly approaching. Barry Trotz has some difficult decisions to make, and there are some names that are being thrown out in the national circles. Some names that I'm sure GMs are picking up the phone and calling Barry Trotz about. So let's do that. Let's do a mock negotiation, and we'll do that coming up next. Caroline, Willy, D-Mase, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Caroline, Willy, D-Mase, 102.5, 106.3, The Game and The Game Nashville app. We're streaming live on Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook Live every single day. And we're live out here at Barrel House at Bridgestone Arena. The Predators in action tonight, finally back at home, taking on the Ottawa Senators. Puck drop at 7 o'clock. Pregame coverage starting at 6 p.m. on 102.5 and 106.3 The Game. But the trade deadline is quickly approaching. We're about a week and a half away. Barry Trotz joined Jared Stillman and Stillman & Company a couple weeks ago, said 10% of my calls are about UC Saros, 90% about the rest of the roster. So we know that Barry's phone is ringing about Tommy Novak's, the Alexander Carriers, the Yakov Trenin, so on and so forth. So if we were in that position, if we were Barry Trotz, if we were the player, if we were a prospective GM, what conversations would we be having? So let's have those conversations. Willy, I will send it over to you for our mock negotiations.
It is really interesting when you see the Predators have won 5 in a row. They are in the playoff position right now. Still a lot of hockey left and a little over a week to the trade deadline. Every big podcast, every big discussion I hear on a national broadcast, their team comes up. And Saros is usually the headliner, but as you just mentioned, all those other guys who are getting a varying amount of interest, who are in the last year of their contracts, are coming up a lot as well. So let's put Saros in another category.
Yeah.
And I will still say, look, D-Mase, I think, is with me on this. We've been a united front for a while. When you have the ace in your hand, just realize that if you're going to change an ace in for 3 cards and you don't know what the cards are, like that would be future draft picks and stuff, I'm keeping the ace. That's just me. But you still hear a lot of noise with that, and I think you probably will. I still think that, man, I would love to have UC Saros down the stretch of this season and then the next several seasons. But that's aside. Let's take some of these guys that are in the last year of their contract. Yesterday on the PDO podcast that we talk about a lot with Dmitry Filipovic, Emily Kaplan, who's an excellent reporter for ESPN that you see all the time, she was his guest. They talked a lot about Tommy Novak yesterday. Elliot Friedman brought up Tommy Novak last week on our show, brought him up again. Apparently there's been a lot of calls on Tommy Novak. So let's just take guys like Novak and Carrier. This is what Barry Trotz is weighing right now, because it's not a question to me of are you a buyer or are you a seller for where the Predators are. I don't think they're a buyer, right? Maybe they'll surprise us and they'll add the right veteran who, like you said, Carolina is in a unique situation, bad contract,
More of
needs
a
fresh
salary
start.
dump.
Sure, you could do that.
Yeah.
But with Milwaukee playing the way they are, I think you're much more likely to stand pat, maybe add one guy. But the question is, do I sell or do I stand pat with a lot of these guys? And some of it has to do with, will somebody agree to the next contract in the budget that Barry Trotz values them? It's not an issue of cap space as much as, can I sign this guy at a rate that is a good value for us going forward? He fits into that next group as I bring up these Milwaukee guys like Kimmel and Zach LaRue, who are playing great, Svechkov. We know that in the coming years, those guys are going to be a part of it. So where do these guys fit? And I'm talking about Novak, Carrier, Trenin. These are really difficult decisions, and you got to commend those guys who are sitting there, and they're all. You can imagine waking up every day and hearing your name, and your agents calling you, and there's all these trade rumors, coming to the rink and doing your job. That's where you have to really be focused, and to win 5 in a row with 5 to 7 players in this sort of hamster wheel right now, where you don't know until after March the 8th. That's a lot to deal with. So these guys did a great job. All right, so I'll be the role of Barry Trotz. D-Mase is going to be the agent for let's just say Tommy Novak for now. And
D-Mase has already warned us. He's bullish as an agent.
As you should be.
Yeah.
This is your guy. D-Mase is going to fight for his
Jerry
guy.
Maguire.
Right. And so, yeah, D-Mase
Help
Maguire.
me help
Show
you.
me the money. Who's coming with me? Who's coming with me?
Derek Maguire.
Okay. And Caroline is going to be the ace GM who's trying to deliver a Stanley Cup for her team, who's in a contention situation. So let's take Novak. He makes very little. He's a unique guy, right? He's an unrestricted free agent who makes very little against the cap. So that's gold, as Dimitri was pointing out, because you don't have to find a way to get a $5 million salary under your cap. Most of these teams are right up against the cap. Novak, you're like, man, this could be great. I could get a guy who can score a little bit. I can add a little weapon to an already good team, and that might push us over the top. Okay, so here's what Barry Trotz is weighing. First, I say, I like Tommy Novak. He's really started to blossom. He's a late bloomer. We drafted him. He's going to be good. So I go to D-Mase. All right, D-Mase, Tommy's doing really well. What are you thinking here? Would he play for, let's start $2 million for a year? That's a big raise. Hey, it's a big raise. He's never made close to $2 million before. What do you think? That's a big raise. What are you going to say, D-Mase?
I understand. Caroline or Barry Caroline.
Barreline.
Barreline. I understand Barreline. Yeah, and you're right. It would be a increase in pay. I get that. I understand that. But have you seen my guy's numbers thus far? He's a young talent, former third-round pick. He will eclipse his goal mark that he had last year. We're only 40-something games in. You need scores. He's a scorer. You got a young team. He can grow with this team. It seems as if, from what I'm watching as an agent, and what from my player Tommy, he loves, he fits well in his scheme, and you can never have too many goal scorers in a league that is geared more towards scoring goals than anything. So I understand the $2 million, and it would be a pay raise, but I think we can get that in the open market.
See, that's, and I'm thinking, God, I was hoping you weren't going to say that. So yeah, he's an unrestricted free agent because he's a little bit older than a lot of guys who have played the amount of games he's played. Because remember, he was not on the radar for a while.
No.
He's a late bloomer. So okay, now, so we're a little stuck right now. So look, I've got two choices here. Can I ride it out and try to reset the deal, see how it goes, or meanwhile, I'm hearing all these things. Caroline calls me and says, oh, what do you got for me, Caroline? We got a free agent here. You want to talk about Tommy Novak? What do you got?
So Tommy Novak is one that if I bring him on my team, that's not the difference between my team winning a cup and not winning a cup. It would be the last little piece to kind of push us over. I'm not going to sell the farm because I know that I can probably find a guy like Tommy Novak somewhere else if you're asking for too much. Like if you want a second-round pick for Tommy Novak, no thanks. I'm good because, yes, he's young-ish, and yes, he's on, less than $1 million deal. It makes what, $800,000? But I know that he's on an expiring deal, and if I want to make it worth my while, I'm going to have to sign him to that next contract. I would say he's probably a $2.5 million kind of guy. I would be willing to trade a 4th-round pick for Tommy Novak.
So if that is what Barry Trotz is weighing, so I'm Barry Trotz, and I'm thinking, okay, I got to go a little higher than maybe I want to sign him to the next deal, or I have to take Caroline's offer of a 4th-round pick, or I have to say, well, Caroline, I got to hope I can get more than a 4th if I'm going to part with this guy. He's an important player on my team. So now I got to see if I can get some other phone calls going on the other contenders and say, okay, he's only $800,000. You can get him under your cap without doing any gymnastics. Is that worth more than a 4? Will you give me a 4th and a 3rd, or will you throw in this other guy? That is what I think he's weighing, not just with Tommy Novak, but for all of these guys, Trennan and Carrier, who he's getting the foot. Remember, that was telling when he said only 10% of the calls are about Saros. So that means there's a lot of phone calls going back and forth about a lot of these guys who could be a piece. And like you said, not a guy that is going to hugely move the needle for a contender.
But a guy that can score goals.
But an extra piece. Yeah. Like Yakov Trenin could be that extra penalty killer, physical guy that is important in a playoff series, right? And Novak could be a guy that can help your power play, make a play. That could be the difference in a 7-game series. Carrier, that extra defenseman that you could feel good about on your 2nd or 3rd pair that could go alongside of another guy that you like and say, boy, he would be a good fit with so-and-so. So could I get somebody to overpay who really, really wants to win the cup, where I could get you to go, well, Caroline, 4th is good, but come on, Tommy Novak can help you. Keep talking. Can I hear a third or something else?
And that's the leverage I think Barry has. I
Yeah.
think Barry has great leverage for a few reasons. When he trades away a player, well, I think you feel really good about what you have in Milwaukee, especially defensemen. You have a wealth of defensemen in Nashville right now. You have a young defenseman in Spencer Stastny that the team knows, that you feel good about, that Barry Trotz can kind of use that of, look, if he goes, we have a solution, a young solution that can come up. But if he doesn't, if I don't get what I want, I don't have to trade anyone. You need the player. You want the extra piece to push yourself over into a cup. I have a team right now that's in a playoff position that is pushing for the playoffs. I don't have to make any moves one way or another. It depends, of course, on the situation, on the player, on the GM that you're talking to. But if I look at it in that kind of perspective, goalies aside, Barry Trotz has a whole lot of leverage in this situation.
Right.
He can squeeze the extra picks and extra money out of the players.
Well, I mean, as his agent, I'm not looking so much at what you can get for, my guy, because if you want to trade my guy, you're going to trade him. But say if we're coming off of, if it starts talking now, say we end the season on a good note and everything's going well, we get into the playoffs and everything else. Why, as a GM, do you want to change anything up?
Right. Especially when you're a former coach.
Exactly.
You know what it's like every day.
You got the right roster. You got the right pairing.
And they're grinding right now. They deserve to kind of keep it together, right?
So why would you want to change that?
Because
now, it could be a shorter deal. Now, listen, I'm open to a shorter deal, meaning years-wise. I'm open to that. Mm-hmm. But I am not just going to allow my player to, play for pennies. And I'm not saying for pennies, but I'm saying you value me by what I have done this season, what this team has done this season, me within the pairing of whoever you're pairing me with. Are we playing well? Do you look to change that up? How does it look if you do indeed change that up? These are all the things that Barry has to be thinking about. And it's like, okay, I can trade them, yes, and I may get some good prospects back. But will those prospects that I'm bringing in, will they help me, one, or will they fit the way my guy fits for your team?
And it depends on the price as well. From the agent side of things, Elliot Friedman was
on
our show.
Because I'm going to say $4 million.
No, thanks.
But then we negotiate. You say 2, I said 4.
Right. Elliot said 4, right?
Yeah.
When we asked him about it, he goes, I hear people saying they could get something like $4 million on the open market because it just takes the one. And so because he said these words, and I think it's true, because Yakov Trenin he helps you win in different ways. He goes, guys that can score get paid. And even though if you're evaluating Tommy Novak, you're like, he's an offensive player. He's not a great defensive player. He's not a great face-off guy. He's not a complete player. But guys who can score are harder to find. So he's got value. So that's the thing that I could go back. If we'd have had a conversation a few weeks ago when he was coming off the injury and he wasn't doing much, maybe $2 million would have sounded a little better. But now you as the agent can say, well, my guy's got 10 points in the last 10 games. He's helping you guys.
He's found his groove.
Yeah, he's coming around.
He's back.
Look what he did last year down the stretch.
$4 million. Yeah. Then Barry says, how about 2, 5, 3? I come back and say, hey, Barry, I talked to my guy. Maybe come up a little bit more, Barry says.
And Tommy's back there going, show me the money.
Barry's
show me the money, D-Mase.
$3 million, and Barry's like, Novak's like, all right, let's work at $3 million.
Okay.
I can do $3 million for
3.2, and then was okay. Let's talk a little term. Let's give you 2 years. Let's give you 3 years. That's I think that's what you would sell if you're Barry Trotz. It's like where you fit here. You're going to get a shot here. You like living here, the taxes, there's no state income tax. You try to work that, and you try to feel like, could you give me a little discount of what you might make on the open market? These are the discussions that are, I think, going on constantly while you're fielding discussions from the contender going, I'll throw in an extra pick. Oh, Carolina only offered you a 4th-round pick? He's worth way more than that. Here comes Jared on the phone calling and representing the Edmonton Oilers. I'll give you 3 picks. We need Tommy Novak. We need a guy to put with Draisaitl. I can fit him under my cap. I'm going for it right now. I don't really care about 5 years from now. Think about Phil Tomasino, all right, and how much discussion we've had about him. He was drafted almost 5 years ago. And he's 22 years old. We still don't know what the finished product is. So that guy you draft this summer that you get a pick for a trade, we don't know what that guy's going to be for years in most cases, right? You're drafting high school seniors. You're not drafting like the NFL. We were just talking about the combine. You're drafting guys who are 22, 23 that are ready to come help you a lot quicker than these guys you pick up in the draft. So if you're Barry Trotz, like the draft picks are one thing, but do I want another batch of draft picks? I got to have some guys that supplement, like as Ryan O'Reilly gets older and Ryan McDonough get older and Gus Nyquist and Forsberg and Yossi. I got to have those guys in the mid-range in their prime to go with all these young early 20s guys that I'm about to bring up, right? So Novak is in that age range. I think that's something to consider.
And that's why I think Barry Trotz, when he was talking about a Soros trade package, but I think that the same logic would apply really to any trade package, is I think prospects are probably a lot more attractive to Barry now than draft picks. The Predators have so many draft picks. That's what they did last year. They sold everybody off, and you got a ton of draft picks. Like, Barry's got draft picks in his back pocket. But right now you need young players. You need young players to bring into this system because, like you said, you're not going to have Ryan O'Reilly forever. You're not going to have Gus Nyquist forever. You need to find players that can ultimately graduate into those positions because let's be honest, all the young guys that you have on your roster right now in Nashville, all of your young guys in Milwaukee, not all of them are going to be NHL players.
Right.
Not all of them are going to be contributors.
And even if they were, you wouldn't have room for all of them.
Yeah,
right? You only need some of them. And so that's the trick. Like, look at Ottawa, the team they're playing tonight. They've got a lot of really good young players. They don't have enough veterans that are supporting those players, and so they haven't figured out how to win. Now, it's some nights you're like, man, this team has got some talent. My gosh. And then other nights you're like, these guys are clueless. They don't. What are they doing? They don't know how to win.
Right.
And so I think their GM is who just took over, right? He just got the reins because they fired the last guy who built this team. Buffalo's seeing that right now. New Jersey is seeing that right now. They haven't figured out how to win. They're too young. So there's that balance of almost having too many prospects and not enough like sure things. So that's the balance you're looking for.
And as we get to the trade deadline, I feel like there's this mindset, maybe with some Predators fans, of you stay pat and you're making a push for the playoffs. You sell and you're giving up on the playoffs. I don't think that that's necessarily the case. If you decide not to sell off anything, I do think that's more of a we're going to make a push. But I think that you can sell some players, you can trade some players, and you can still make the playoffs.
That's that fine line. You're trying to, whatever I can picture Luke Skywalker in the X-Wing. He's down that trench. He's getting all the way, he's got to get through this little trench. I think that's what you want.
Yeah.
Sell the right guys, get some futures. You've got maybe the right guys from Milwaukee that can support it, and you still can make the playoffs. That would be the perfect storm, right? Sell off a little bit, don't take your eye off the future, but also reward this team and give them a chance to make it to the playoffs this year because they've earned it.
They have. And I look at this team, and I'll always couch any moves that you make this trade deadline, this offseason, how does it fit into the long-term goal? Because the goal is to build a cup contending team, not just to make the playoffs this year. That'd be great. Playoffs are a blast.
It's fun to make the playoffs.
It'd be so fun. But I am not willing to mortgage the future to make the playoffs this year. But where is this team at? Chase was on with Robbie yesterday morning, and he said one thing about the trajectory of this Predators team that kind of made me think, raise an eyebrow a little bit at. And we'll get into that coming up next. We'll also get into your phone. 615-737-1025 is the phone number. Caroline, Willy, D-Mase. We're brought to you by Zen Sports. Start earning cash. To bed. Caroline, Willy, D-Mase. We are broadcasting from the Spring Hill Heating and Cooling Game Nashville studios, which today is Barrel House at Bridgestone Arena. Predators taking on the Ottawa Senators tonight. Puck drop at 7 o'clock. I know I teased something that Chase said, but we have some new tea.
Oh, boy.
We have some
boy.
new tea.
New tea.
This coming out from Frank Saravalli. He tweeted, sources, at least one team, believed to be the New Jersey Devils, has shown real interest in UC Saros the last few weeks. We knew that. But Predators say that they're intent on keeping Saros so long as they're in the playoffs. Frank Saravalli writes, all season long, there has been question as to whether Saros is actually available. GM Barry Trotz told us in November that he was looking to sign the 28-year-old backbone of his franchise to an extension. Then reports surfaced that the Preds might have to consider a move. Well, at least one team has been very interested in Saros over the last couple of weeks, believed to be the Devils. But Daily Faceoff sources indicated on Monday that the Preds have told teams that as long as they're in a position to make the playoffs, that Saros will not be traded. That is some new news. Is that the smartest approach? Or is this a move from Barry Trotz to say, we're not going to trade him so the price goes up?
All very good questions, I would say. Now, we just talked about Barry Trotz knows what it's like to be in the trenches, right? He knows what it's like to, go on a long road trip and win 5 in a row, and the guys are excited. Like, man, can't wait to get back to the rink tomorrow. We got it going. We got chemistry right now. It's all the Pistons are firing. Saros is starting to find his A game. Man, that's exciting.
And that's probably how they're feeling right now. They're feeling it.
So it'd be one thing to trade 1 or 2 role players where the guys could say, oh, man, you took so-and-so. He's a key piece. He's a key piece. But they could still say, well, we have these guys coming up that we've seen before, and maybe we can fill that role. Trading UC Saros when you're in a playoff spot would yank the rug out from under that squad. And I remember the looks on everybody's face last year when they traded Tanner Jeannot and Nino Niederreiter on a long road trip. Those were the first couple, and then the dominoes fell after that. But there was heartbreak, right? Like Roman Josi, Nino Niederreiter, he called Nino Niederreiter, who's from Switzerland, and said, would you join our team? I think we got a chance to be a good team. Will you come? Niederreiter comes. And then they pull the plug on it because of where they were, and it was probably the right move, right? But that still was tough for that group to – so imagine trading somebody like Saros, who, that changes your whole DNA as a team instantly if you do that.
It demoralizes you as a team if you sort of go down that path, especially, because, we got 2 weeks, somewhere around there, a little bit less. It's a little bit less actually, before the trade deadline comes and goes, and just say they win tonight, as I believe they will win tonight. So you're talking about 6 in a row. It may end up being a little bit longer heading into the trade deadline. You can't then tell the team, okay, y'all been playing great, but we're gonna trade our star goalie. Can't do that. Under no unless they
Why not?
Unless they are offering you a surefire, goal scorer, young phenom, then you don't because you've built this chemistry, and the one guy that that once he started playing well, it increases our ability to win tenfold. If Saros continues to play the way he has been playing, it gives them a better opportunity to win games. And then if you go and trade that guy, that's telling everybody in that building, your job is not secure. I don't care what you're doing. And that's demoralizing to a locker room to walk in there 1 minute, to have our guy ready to go, and then he get traded. We walk in the locker room, he's there, he's not there anymore. You're going to go out there and play because you have to. That's your job.
That's your job.
But it's demoralizing as a team. We did the things that you asked us to do. Make a run, and we're making that run. And all of a sudden, you pull arguably one of the best, if not the best player on our team, the most important player on our team. You pull him and trade him for what? A young guy, a Skarov, that he may be great, but right now he's not there. Or Lankinen. Lankinen is stable, but he's not the goalie of the future. So what you're saying is we're just going to part ways with Soros and throw somebody else in there, Lincoln, and expect this young guy to now, as we're in the thick of things, because every game moving forward is a playoff game.
But you don't trade him for nothing.
No, but what I'm saying is that
nothing immediate
exactly,
that will help this team.
Absolutely.
That's probably what you're looking.
But what did we just get finished saying? That the priority of this team is building a cup contending team. It's not the playoffs.
Well, you can build that team with
I am not
Soros
willing to mortgage the future for making the playoffs right now. That if everybody has a price, right? And Barry Trotz has a certain price for UC Soros. And if that price is met, if you get that price exceeded because the New Jersey Devils are so freaking desperate for a goaltender, like Barry Trotz said, you need a goaltender. I do not need a goaltender.
But what would they be
if you can
willing to
play
give?
into the desperation and you think what you get back, as hard as it would be to move on from UC Soros, what you would get back in that return would better align you for winning a Stanley Cup down the line, then that's a decision that I have to make. As hard as it would be, as demoralizing as it would be, as good as this team has been playing, I can live with not making the playoffs this year if I build a cup contending team with what I would get back for UC Soros.
But the Devils, if they
I don't agree with necessarily what Barry Trotz reportedly said per Frank Saravalli.
But what if the Devils are indeed looking for that one guy because they feel they are that one guy away, they're not going to give up the farm because they're ready now. And if you make that trade, you got to Barry's going to want you to give up something or more than something important. Something that I can have that I can see immediately on the ice, for one.
Do you need to see it immediately on the ice?
If I'm trading away Soros, I need somebody that can help me now and people that can help me in the future. I'm not just going to trade them away for guys that may help me in the future because, again, they're not going to give up. If they want him that bad and they're that close, if I'm a GM, I am not giving up the farm for him because that sets me back. Even this season is going to set me back because Barry's going to want something that can help him right now as well.
I think I would look at it from the Devils' point of view. We could be in a window. Like we're a cup contending team, that we have some really exciting prospects that we are very excited about. Those prospects aren't going to help us win a cup this year.
I think if you look at their roster, they have a lot of exciting pieces.
Yeah.
But almost too many young pieces that are the same. Think about the Braves 4 or 5 years ago when they went through 4 years of hell, the 4 bad years, where they were revitalizing the system, right? And all of a sudden, you were reading in Baseball America, they've got the number 1 prospect pool in Major League Baseball, somewhere around there, right? They had a lot of these guys coming up, Acuna, and all these guys you're seeing today, Swanson, but at some point they had to part with some of the pieces to go get the right pieces to build a championship team, which they did very successfully.
Right.
They did a great job. I think that's where Tom Fitzgerald is. And if you look, since they came here and won, they've kind of hit the skids. They haven't played well. And so they're way behind. They need a big finish just to make the playoffs this year. But I think they're thinking not just this year, but in the next couple of years, they need the goalie, and they would be willing to part with some pieces that look like they're very promising in order to have the stability of a goalie. So all that being said, I still am with D-Mase that these proposals you're hearing from the Devils, they're good. They're in the ballpark. There's a lot enticing there. A really good prospect in college, a future first-round pick, and a guy that's already maybe produced way past a Tomasino, a Parson at 22 years of age, Dawson Mercer, that kind of guy. That's enticing. It's tantalizing. But I still like, just me, I like having the ace. I don't want cards that are just given to me that I don't know what's under the card. It's like card sharks. Higher or lower? Here's the card. I don't know what's under there. It could be a 2. Oh, man, a 2? I just gave up my ace for a 2? Like, we don't know. I like the certainty of Soros. So here's one thing to consider, too.
Yeah.
We just had this conversation about Trotz talking to the agent. There's no question that Barry Trotz has been bouncing off Soros' agent. What's it going to take?
Totally.
What are you thinking for the next contract? Do you want 7 years? Do you want 8 years? Or can I talk you into 3 or 4 years for a little bit more? I think these are I read a report last week from Dave Pengoda, and that's what he's saying, that they've had some back and forth with that. And I'm sure that's the case. That's natural, right?
Totally.
But if Saros' agent is telling you he's not going to sign for less than $9 million a year, then Barry Trotz has got to react differently than if he said, yeah, we're open to $7.5 per year or something like that, because that's kind of the range that you're looking at right there for Saros. To me, I have no problem investing big money in UC Saros. You know why? He's consistent. I know him as a person. I know his work ethic. I believe that he will be worthy of an investment. Kind of like with Jeffrey Simmons. It was different investing big money in Jeffrey Simmons than it was back a few years ago investing in Albert Haynesworth. No offense to him, but he was a little more of a mercurial, up and down. Work ethic was in question sometimes. And so they were like, God, I don't know if I want to go big money on Haynesworth. And they were right not to invest in it, but it hurt them not to have him, right? But you love saying, I know this guy is a grade A person, and so I'll deal with the consequences and pay the big money for that guy.
And that's all I'm saying is, like, if I'm going to trade him away, like, listen, I'm not saying that under no circumstance will I trade him, but what I'm saying is it has to be the right circumstance.
And you don't have to do anything unless you get what you are asking for.
Absolutely.
You don't have to make any decision. But to say, and this again is a report from Frank Saravalli, it says at least one team believed to be the New Jersey Devils has shown real interest in UC Saros the last few weeks. We knew that. The new news, the Preds say they're intent on keeping Saros so long as they're in the playoffs. I don't agree with that, because you never know. The closer we get to the trade deadline, maybe you find yourself in a playoff spot. You never know what offer could be on your table. Because I'm okay with not making the playoffs this year as long as your end goal is not compromised.
Well, okay, see, we got to look. I understand what you're saying, but let me look at it from just a sort of a player head coach standpoint, not necessarily the GM. We say, well, it doesn't matter, because the way this team constructed, I think they are they're playing above, where we thought they were going to be. They are overachieving, which is a good thing with these young players. Young players, veteran players, this team, head coach, there's not a price you can put on the experience you get once you get in the playoffs. So it's not about, we don't care if we make the playoff. We're trying to set ourselves up.
There's still no guarantee that you do make the playoffs if you don't trade Saros.
I understand that, but we are better aligned right now to make the playoff if Saros is on our team. Because once you get in the playoffs, listen, I don't expect them, once they get in the playoffs, to just go on this run and they beat everybody and they make it to the Stanley Cup. The odds of that happening is very, very slim.
They'll be a big underdog in the first round.
But that experience that they're getting inside of the playoffs. So when that next following season, when that team is a little bit older, a little bit more mature, now when we do get in the playoffs, as everybody expects us to, it's not a first-time thing.
Yeah.
We've experienced it once. We may have gotten swept. So be it. But those young guys know what it's about. I can't tell you how many times we've went into the playoff with young guys and they just don't know what it's about. Like, they think they know what it's about before the playoffs, and you hear a lot of these guys, even myself, once you get in the playoffs, it's like, man, I didn't know it was like, because everything is heightened. There's no mistakes here. Everything has to be damn near flawless. And that experience you can't get unless you are in the playoffs.
And there's no guarantee whether if you sell or if you stand pat that you'll make the playoffs or you won't make the playoffs. Yeah. So that's what you have to keep in mind as well. But I will ask you, what is more valuable, playoff experience or a potential top 6 scorer for the next 10 years?
Or also...
Which also is no guarantee.
And also I'm weighing this. If I'm paying Saros handsomely, he makes $5 through next year. That next contract will kick in, and you got to have a price you can live with. But if it's a price you can live with, let's just put it in the neighborhood of $8 million a year. Can I build a championship roster with Saros making $8 million a year from age 29 through, say, 33, 34? That's a very important question. And I think the answer is yes, me personally, but Barry Trotz has to think that. And he has to think, can I get enough weaponry and championship material without getting assets back for him in a trade? That's the key question.
It is. It's
That's
huge.
a bigger question than, do I make the playoffs this year with Saros?
Right. And that's what you're thinking about, is big picture with this team. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. We'll get into your thoughts on this. Plus, coming up next, the Predators are back at home. They take on the Ottawa Senators. The Predators are such a freaking fun team to watch right now. They've been winning games. They're 5-0-0 on the road trip. You're in a playoff push. You find yourself in a wild card position, but I am so terrified of this game tonight. And we'll get into that coming up next. Caroline, Willy, D-Mase. Nashville's best deal this week is 312 Pizza Company. 312 Pizza Company serves the best pizza in town. I agree. I love it. It's my personal favorite. But they've also got Chicago-style eats like Chicago dogs, Italian beef sandwiches, and so much more. Get half off a $30 gift card to 312 Pizza Company at thegamenashville.com/deals right now while supplies last.
Have you had any talks about the goaltender? Have you had any talks with New Jersey here as we start to kind of get going and things like that?
No. Me and Fitzy talk all the time. Not necessarily about Juice, but I know goaltending. He always circles back, and I go, "Oh, this is what we need if we're going to do something like that." I've made it very public. It has to be something that'll shake me a little bit and make sense for both teams, or I'm not going to. I'm in no hurry to do it. I don't need a goaltender. He does. So I keep reminding him of that. So, he's asset management. He's doing his diligence around the league, and as I said to Juice, unless something knocks me, backwards, I'm always going to let him be in the fold.
There were those Barry Trotz on with Stillman and Company 2 weeks ago. So that was February 14th. Barry Trotz says, look, you're going to have to knock my socks off. You're going to have to blow me away. And we know that New Jersey has picked up the phone and has called Barry Trotz and that they need better goaltending. They're desperate for goaltending. This from Frank Saravalli coming out just about an hour ago. One team believed to be the New Jersey Devils has shown real interest in UC Saros the last few weeks, but Predators say they're intent on keeping Saros so long as they're in the playoffs. That's a change. So my question is, if Tom Fitzgerald comes and meets the asking price, but you find yourself in a playoff position, what do? I think if the asking price is so high and you say you're going to have to blow me away and you get blown away, how do you not take the offer?
What is the asking price? No one knows what
that's
the
the-
asking price is.
High.
Higher.
Yeah,
Let's say, can we narrow it down and say it's higher than what has been offered to this day?
And what
Yes.
has been offered.
Because if
So,
it
and we don't know what
has been met, I feel like you would have done.
right.
it.
If you just Google Devils Saros or something, you'll see several different proposals, variations of trade packages that people have thrown out there. Put whatever stock in there you think is there, where you think that's a good offer or not. But whatever you say, whatever they have actually proposed, if it's in that ballpark, I still think Barry Trotz has probably seen that and said, not quite enough. I like my guy. I'm keeping my guy.
That makes sense.
Which does make sense.
Yeah.
But what if they double down? What if there's more? But keep this in mind, too. An extra first rounder or second rounder is not going to move the needle for Barry Trotz. That guy, it takes 4 or 5 years
Prospects,
before
players.
you know. Prospects who are almost on the verge of playing big, that's maybe a little different. And then there's the established player that would be great. But throwing an extra draft pick or two, that's not going to meet the price, I don't think. They've got plenty of draft picks. Like I
they
think
don't
about
need
this
picks.
with Novak. Like, throw me a fourth or a third. Why? I'll keep Tommy Novak. I'd rather have him. You need guys in that mid-20s in their prime. I don't know what I'm getting. These are cards that you're sliding me that I don't know what's underneath the card. Where I know exactly what I have in these assets. Right? I just have to assign the next value. The good thing about Saros is you're not afraid you're going to lose him in a couple months. You have him under contract all the way through next year. You can revisit it in the summer if you want to.
Your asking price is your asking price. And I've kind of been under the impression of you don't meet the price, you don't get UC Saros. You do meet the price, well, I'm probably going to trade UC Saros.
Jared just walked
But
up
this
here.
playoff discussion is different.
We had a great discussion of can you take the emotions out of it and say, here's my price, you meet the price, you get the player, and not have the emotions come into it. Like D-Mase, you're like, D-Mase is like, I've been in that locker room, man. I know you can't help but to be caught up in the emotion of your team has won 5 in a row. Your team is sitting there going, keep my guy. We deserve to have a shot to be the best we can be, even if it's a lose in the first round. Unless you can be totally cold-blooded, you're influenced by that emotion, right? That's why we're in the playoffs. I gotta consider that.
Tough business.
Tough
for sure.
business.
Barry Trotz.
First year GM.
Oof. Barry Trotz will join Jared Stillman today, so we'll get some answers from GM Barry Trotz. That's going to do it for us today. We'll be back tomorrow at 11 a.m. Stillman and Company's up next.
Be love and love on your people. Peace.